Hey guys, welcome to a new story. Today, our story is called Game Supplies Mutate. All game items turn into the ultimate luxury edition. If you like today's story, please leave 3 red hearts in the comment section. The female soldier lying on the ground was called Yin. At this moment, she was being tortured by her closest comrade-in-arms. Because if she is killed, her place will be taken by this man. The man also laughed. Global Eastern Commander-in-Chief, second only to the chief, and the only general. Who wouldn't want to sit in this position? In order to kill this extraordinary woman, the man specially obtained the developed neurotoxin number 7. As soon as the toxin enters the body, all of the woman's muscles and nerves will atrophy. In the end times, almost all people with superpowers have single superpowers, but she has dual superpowers. But no matter how powerful this woman's abilities were, it was probably too late to save the situation at this point. At this time, her body began to twitch uncontrollably, and in an instant, her hands and legs had shriveled up to skin and bones. But the woman said calmly, "Not everyone can take this position." Her eyes suddenly turned fierce, as if she was planning something. "Let's go to hell together." She moved her lips slightly. In an instant, a blue flame suddenly ignited on the man's body. The clear pupils reflected the blue firelight, becoming increasingly blurry, and the shrill screams became increasingly distant. She looked up at the sky, a hint of relief appearing on the corners of her mouth. Perhaps she was already tired of this end of the world. But she didn't expect that after her rebirth, she changed from the first commander of the eastern part of the apocalypse to a cowardly and incompetent lady of a wealthy family. What's worse is that in this life, not only did she not awaken her supernatural powers, but she was also kidnapped by a few gangsters. "Bitch, I'm thinking highly of you when I'm having sex with you. Why aren't you happy?" A yellow-haired gangster slapped her hard in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. Yin was slapped to the ground on the cold concrete floor. Before she could stand up, 2 thugs pounced on her and held her down. Yin struggled and shouted, "Let me go. My father is a colonel. He won't let you go." Tears slid down her swollen cheeks, her face full of helplessness and fear. "Sister, do you really think that Dad will still help you after you lose your virginity and suffer shame?" A sneering voice sounded. Yin looked in the direction of the voice and saw a girl in school uniform leaning lazily against the wall with a mocking smile on her face. Yi Ning, her sister. Yi Yan's face turned pale instantly. Huang Mao immediately came up to Yi Ning like a dog and said respectfully, "Why are you here?" Yi Ning smiled contemptuously, took out her cell phone, and prepared to take photos and videos. "Of course I have to appreciate my sister's appearance." Her tone was cold, with undisguised resentment in her eyes. Yin looked at Yi Ning angrily, his voice trembling and hoarse. "Yi Ning, why did you do this?" The sneer on Yi Ning's face became even more intense, and a trace of hatred flashed in his eyes. "Who made Grandpa love only you? Why did he leave everything to you? Today I want to let everyone know how despicable you Yin are." She snorted coldly and shouted at the thugs, "Hurry up!" Several thugs received the order and began to tear Yi Yan's clothes. Yi Yan's face turned pale, and he was filled with grief and anger. Just when they succeeded, she suddenly bit one of them's hand hard, took the opportunity to break free, and ran towards the door desperately. She had only taken 2 steps when her foot slipped, and she tumbled down the concrete stairs. Bah! A dull sound of falling echoed throughout the factory, and the air seemed to freeze instantly. Yi Ning and the thugs looked at each other in astonishment, then hurried downstairs and saw Yin lying in a pool of blood, motionless. Huang Mao was so scared that his face turned pale. He didn't dare to get close, and even took a few steps back. Yi Ning's heart was panicking, but he still forced himself to move forward, tremblingly checking Yi Yan's breath, and then suddenly retracted his hand. "He's dead." She spoke stiffly, her voice filled with panic that could not be concealed, and cursed. "You actually caused a death." Several hooligans looked at each other in bewilderment and said in a panic, "This, we don't know either." Yi Ning gritted his teeth and tried to calm himself down. "She's already dead, so let's go all the way. Find an unlicensed car and dump her body in the wilderness. Don't let anyone find it." As the night deepened, an unlicensed van stopped in a secluded place on a barren mountain. Several people stealthily dragged Yi Yan's body out of the trunk, threw it into the woods nearby, and then drove away quickly. Just as Yi Yan was abandoned in the dark forest, the air was filled with the smell of dirt and decay. Her consciousness gradually returned, and she was hit by a sharp pain. Her head was splitting, and her whole body felt like it had been crushed. Every inch of her skin was an unbearable pain. She opened her eyes, and despite the darkness surrounding her, a cold light faintly shone through her clear pupils. Her head felt dizzy and painful, and she gasped when she moved slightly. Her calf was broken. Her head seemed to have a concussion, and there were many soft tissue contusions all over her body. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. This level of injury was not the result of abuse, but more like the result of falling down the stairs. Wait, she was startled. In her memory, she was clearly poisoned by neurotoxin number 7. Ian lay on the cold ground, and with deep doubts, he began to carefully look at every inch of his skin. Although it was pitch black all around, her eyes quickly adapted to the darkness. The rigorous special training she had received had given her the ability to see as clearly as in the daytime, even in the dark. What's going on?" she murmured, and was stunned when she heard her own unfamiliar voice. The voice was soft and childish, not at all familiar to her. She realized that this was not her body. She tried to concentrate to understand the situation in front of her, but as soon as she focused, she felt a sharp pain in her head. The damn concussion made it impossible for her to think clearly. So she decided to give up struggling for the time being, close her eyes, and rest quietly. At this moment, a strong consciousness surged into her mind, entangled her thoughts like a tangled mess. Those memories that did not belong to her gave her a splitting headache and even caused her consciousness to shut down, and she fainted. About half an hour later, Yin opened her eyes again. Those memories that did not belong to her had merged with her memories when she was unconscious. She finally understood what had happened to her. She was indeed dead, but her consciousness traveled to a strange body and was reborn as a 16-year-old girl named Yin. This girl, Yin, was born into the Yi family of the Xinglu Empire and was the eldest daughter of a military family. Her mother died early, and she lived with her father and stepmother, with a younger brother and a half-sister, Yi Ning. Yin also has a special name, Yi Weiguo, which was given to her by her grandfather Yi Zhengwo himself. Yi Zhengwo is an old general with a great reputation in the army. He loves his grandson dearly and gave her this name in the hope that she will be able to defend her country like himself one day. However, this name was too masculine in her mother's eyes, so her family usually called her Yin. Only Yi Ning would deliberately call her Yi Weiguo in public to make fun of her and cause others to laugh. More than a year ago, Yi Zhengwo was admitted to the intensive care unit due to a serious illness, and his condition recurred. However, half a year ago, the old general made a will while he was ill, announcing that he would leave all his property to Yin. This will make the entire Yi family resentful towards Yin. Her father also became cold to her, and even Yi Ning was jealous to the core. He finally planned this frame-up, causing her to fall to her death. Yi Yan's predecessor died because of this. Thinking of this scene, she chuckled with some sarcasm. This Yi Ning was really cruel, and she was even more looking forward to Yi Ning's expression when he saw her resurrection. Yin slowly sat up from the ground. She understood that since she had been reborn, she would never lose her life easily again. She pressed her aching calf with her hand and confirmed that her fracture was serious. Her head was swollen and her body was covered with bruises. If the injury is not treated quickly, the patient may become disabled at best or die at worst. A cold wind blew through the forest, and she couldn't help but shiver as the chill hit her. This feeling of cold made her dazed for a moment. In her original apocalypse, global temperatures soared for hundreds of years, the 4 seasons disappeared, and even the concept of cold was forgotten. This peaceful environment and the climate with 4 distinct seasons, it's simply incredibly beautiful. She took a deep breath of the cold air, and the long-lost freshness moved her heart. However, she had no time to indulge in her feelings. She immediately tore off a piece of cloth from the corner of her clothes, carefully fixed the broken part, barely stood up, held onto the tree, and moved out of the forest with difficulty. After being reborn once, she will never easily give up the opportunity to control her own destiny. Yin stared intently at the 2 branches in front of him, trying to control them with his previous supernatural powers. However, the branches did not move at all, and she couldn't help feeling lost. Now it seems that this reborn body does not carry her abilities. She gave up reluctantly, bent down, and picked up the branch with her own hands. As a soldier, treating wounds was not difficult for her. She deftly used 2 branches to hold her broken calf in place, and used torn clothing as a makeshift bandage. There were many scratches on her body, which had gradually scabbed over due to the wind, but she had lost a lot of blood, so she could only endure it and wait for recovery. At this moment, on the cement drive outside the forest, the roar of motors broke the silence of the night, and one car after another sped past. On the mountainside, the driveway hidden in the night is brightly lit, and the red and blue flags flutter in the wind. Several cars were parked on the side of the road, with a group of young men standing on both sides. Most of them were young, with fashionable female companions by their sides. They were obviously the playboys who often came here to race cars. However, this group of people were unusual. Most of their license plates began with Go or Jin, and it was obvious that they came from extraordinary backgrounds. At this time, a luxury car slowly drove into the lane. It was not marked with national or military, but no one dared to take it lightly. "It's Mr. Fu's car," someone whispered. "Don't call him Mr. Fu, call him Mr. Fu." The man next to him corrected softly. After the car stopped, someone immediately stepped forward, respectfully opened the door, and called out in a low voice, "Mr. Fu." The car door slowly opened, and a pair of slender legs stepped out of the car first, followed by a tall man appearing. He was only wearing a white shirt with 2 buttons casually undone, revealing his graceful collarbone. He looked a little unruly, but not frivolous. Instead, he exuded a hint of cynical charm. Seeing him appear, 2 young men leaning against the sports car also came over. A man with bright eyebrows and bright eyes, an upright posture, steady and powerful steps, and wearing a pair of military boots. He is obviously a soldier. He whispered to the man, "Yunshin, why are you here today?" Fu Yunshin answered casually, "Come and take a look." He leaned lazily against the car and lit a cigarette. The curling smoke concealed a hint of depth in his eyes. He didn't understand why he was so upset today. He came here to relax after hearing that someone was racing here. "Since you're here, why not play a few games?" Another young man came over, wearing casual clothes and handsome, and said to him with a teasing smile, "Mr. Fu, it's rare for you to come here. You won't leave without playing a few games, right?" Fu Yunshin glanced at Chun Su indifferently without responding, causing Chun Su to touch his nose in embarrassment. Xiao Yang beside him laughed and joked, "Chun Su, you know that we have 2 hard rules in Yunshin. First, never touch girls outside. Second, never hang out outside. The rules here are clear. The loser has to book the whole place in the Tonkei Tower once." The people around listened and whispered to each other, and the young gentleman introduced the 3 young men to the female companions beside them. Although they introduced themselves briefly, it was enough to make the female companions beside them envious. The young men on the hillside were not ordinary people. The sound of motors in the night came one after another, accompanied by bursts of whistling, making the coolness in the mountains seem to have a little more warmth. Fu Yunshin looked at the racing cars whizzing past on the track. He was usually calm, but today he was provoked and aroused by the fighting spirit. He casually swung the car keys between his fingers a few times, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and looked at the 2 people in front of him. The bet has changed this time. The loser not only has to book the entire Tonkei Tower, but also has to strip naked and run around this mountain. Xiao Yang was stunned, half surprised and half helpless. "Ah." Chun Su was also stunned. Question mark. The people around him started to make a fuss when they heard the bet. Fu Yunshin got into the car, inserted the key, and started the engine. Xiao Yang also laughed helplessly and scolded, "Yunshin, don't do this. If you dare to run 1 meter more, it will be considered a foul." As he spoke, he got into the car. Chun Su was not to be outdone, so he immediately got back into the car and started the engine. People in the driveway joined in the gamble. As the green light came on, accompanied by a ding sound, all the cars rushed into the curve ahead like arrows from a bow and disappeared into the mountains in the blink of an eye. In the woods not far away, Yin supported himself with the help of a thick branch and staggered out of the woods. Suddenly, she was startled by the lights and sounds of cars whizzing past. Speeding? This was the first thought that came to her mind. Coincidentally, she was worried about how to get down the mountain. She had excellent hearing and quickly determined that most of the cars on the track had been modified, but the roar of one car seemed particularly different, and it had not been modified. She couldn't help but smile slightly, judging that the car was approaching quickly, getting closer and closer. Yin calculated the distance and speed of the car, walked forward a few steps, and stood in the middle of the track without fear. At this time, although Fu Yunshin was an excellent driver, he was not as familiar with the terrain of the mountain as others, and was quickly left behind in the first lap. Thinking of the bold bet just now, Fu Yunshin couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He secretly swore in his heart that he would let his assistant Lu Qi go up the mountain for him, to complete the naked streak bet. However, just as he looked up, a figure suddenly appeared in his sight, no more than 100 meters away. Fu Yunshin's face suddenly changed, and he honked the horn repeatedly, trying to warn the other party to get out of the way. However, the figure stood still in the middle of the road, like a faint shadow. Fu Yunshin slammed on the brakes, the car body shook, and he was almost thrown out. He frowned, got out of the car to check, and found it was a woman. Yin stood in the middle of the road, with a wooden stick between his calves, which looked broken. His face was dirty, but his clear eyes were the only thing that shone so brightly in the darkness that they seemed to be reflecting light. Fu Yunshin said coldly, "Want to die?" The man in front of her was a head taller than her. His white shirt was particularly eye-catching in the night, and his handsome features were even more distinct because of his anger. Yin calmly searched the vocabulary in his mind and answered, bumping into a porcelain. Fu Yunshin was stunned. It was the first time he saw someone committing fraud so confidently. He looked at her coldly, as if he wanted to strangle her to death. Yin was calm and composed. "You may have some misunderstanding about the scam." Fu Yunshin sneered slightly and finally resigned himself to throwing a stack of banknotes from his pocket and turned around to get in the car. Yin picked up the banknote calmly, his eyes determined. "Are you racing? I can help you win." He stopped and looked back at her. The girl's tone was calm, which was not in line with her age. "You just finished a lap, right? These cars have a top speed of about 310 kilometers per hour. This mountain road has many bends, so it takes at least 10 minutes to run a lap. Add in the 5 minutes you just wasted, and I can let you catch up with them in the third lap." Fu Yunshin's eyebrows moved slightly, and there was a hint of scrutiny in his eyes. Yin proposed a condition. "I will help you win on the condition that you take me down the mountain and to the hospital." She added, "The money will not be refunded." Fu Yunshin glanced at her helplessly, turned and walked to the passenger seat. "Get in the car." Yin calmly walked to the driver's seat, leaning on a branch, and sat down. She broke off a branch, used the thick part to support her left leg, and controlled the steering wheel with her right hand. Although she had bruises all over her body, she started the car calmly. Fu Yunshin was confused. He thought she was just pretending, but he didn't expect her to actually start the car. Yin's eyes were focused and calm as he looked straight ahead, just like the expression of the Empire's top sniper he had seen aiming at his prey. "Hold on tight," Yin suddenly reminded. Fu Yunshin subconsciously gripped the handlebars tightly, and the car drifted beautifully around the sharp bend in the mountain road without any delay, continuing to move forward steadily. Fu Yunshin's body was almost thrown out, but he firmly grasped the handle above, his eyes fixed on Yin, trying to find some clues from her face. Good driving skills. He tried to remain calm and spoke lightly. Yin controlled the steering wheel with one hand and replied casually, "I used to deliver tofu to my family for a few years." "The god of driving in Akina Mountain?" Fu Yunshin asked subconsciously. Yin glanced at him calmly, said nothing more, and looked ahead intently. Only then did Fu Yunshin notice that the scabs on the back of her head, back, and many parts of her body were seeping out again, and the strong smell of blood instantly filled the carriage. "You!" A cold light flashed in Fu Yunshin's eyes. "Don't worry, you can hold on until the last lap." Yin thought he was worried about her condition, and his tone was calm and firm. Fu Yunshin frowned and said nothing more. When the race reached the third lap, a silver-white car caught up like thunder, quickly surpassed most of the cars, and rushed to the front. The people watching the game exclaimed, "No way! That's Mr. Fu's car. How could it be so fast? What kind of drift was that just now? I've never seen it before." Xiao Yang and Chun Su in the front also saw the silver car catching up in the rearview mirror and were shocked. When did Yun Shun's driving skills become so strong? As the race entered the last lap, the leading cars of Xiao Yang and Chun Su were still in the front, while the silver-white car followed closely behind. Fu Yunshin looked at Yi and steadily. Her face became paler and her lips were almost transparent. The smell of blood in the car almost made him doubt. If he didn't know that she was a human, he would probably think that his car was driven by a female ghost. Who is she? Why is she on this mountain? Why is she so seriously injured? A series of questions swirled in Fu Yunshin's mind, but he did not ask them. He just watched her every move in silence. Just when he was distracted, Yin suddenly accelerated, and the pointer of the dial almost broke through the boundaries of the dial. "Hold on tight." Yin spoke again. Fu Yunshin did not dare to be careless. His intuition told him that the woman in front of him seemed to be omnipotent. Yin narrowed her eyes slightly, stepped on the accelerator, and turned the steering wheel suddenly in her hands. The silver-white car rushed out several hundred meters in an instant. The people around held their breath. What is Master Fu doing? Xiao Yang and Chen Su were horrified. What is that lunatic Fu Yunshin doing? The car driven by Yin rushed straight into the narrow gap between Xiao Yang and Chen Su's cars. Fu Yunshin, are you crazy? Don't drag us down with you, if you want to die. Xiao Yang and Chen Su yelled in horror and tried to avoid it, but it was too late. Fu Yunshin coldly took off his headset and threw it aside, not wanting to listen to their noise anymore. He looked at Yin, who was driving calmly beside him, and actually felt a sense of trust in him. He grasped the handles on both sides and sighed inwardly. What a hell. Just when everyone thought the car was going to hit them head-on, the silver-white car suddenly turned sideways and passed right between the two cars, sparks flying instantly. After the car body landed steadily, it vibrated slightly due to inertia, and the tail drew a half circle and slid through the bend of the mountain. When everyone was surprised to pass the bend, the car had already stopped steadily at the finish line. Everyone was shocked by this thrilling operation. Xiao Yang almost wanted to swear. Looking at the car parked at the finish line, he was still in shock, thinking that 3 lives had almost been lost. Fu Yunshin hadn't recovered yet. He was slightly shocked and couldn't help but recall everything that had just happened. At this moment, he just turned his head to look at Yin and heard a long horn sound. Yin's head hit the steering wheel weakly and he fainted. He immediately unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the car door. The people who were about to come forward to congratulate him were stunned to see Fu Yunshin actually get out of the car from the passenger seat. Before I could react, I saw him quickly walk around to the driver's seat and carry a girl covered in blood out of the car. There were whispers in the crowd. What's going on? Master Fu was driving a car and picked up someone along the way. Fu Yunshin looked down at the dirty but handsome face in his arms, and a feeling of heartache he had never felt before surged in his heart. He calmly ordered, "Contact Rongyue immediately and ask him to rush to Ziyuan immediately." Yes. Lu Qi glanced at Yin and immediately dialed the phone. At this time, the racing teams behind also arrived at the finish line one after another. Xiao Yang and Chen Su got out of the car and walked quickly towards Fu Yunshin, trying to figure out what had just happened. However, when they saw Fu Yunshin holding a girl covered in blood and wearing what looked like a college uniform in his arms, they were stunned for a moment. Fu Yunshin ignored their shock, carried Yin into the car. Lu Qi sat in the driver's seat, stepped on the accelerator, and the car instantly disappeared into the night, leaving only the dim light of the taillights. Xiao Yang frowned, grabbed a person next to him, and asked, "What's going on?" "Boss Xiao, that woman was in Mr. Fu's car. It seemed that she was sitting in the driver's seat at the destination." The man was so overwhelmed by Xiao Yang's aura that he dared not hide it. Xiao Yang and Chen Su looked at each other in shock. Was she driving just now? Chen Su chuckled and put his hands in his trouser pockets with the corners of his lips slightly raised. "Call up the mountain road surveillance. I want to see where this woman came from." At the same time, Yin vaguely smelled the strong smell of medicine, realized that he was receiving treatment, and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the man kept his promise. She knew how badly she was injured. Even if she was reborn, her body would quickly collapse if she didn't receive timely treatment. She gradually regained consciousness, but her body was too weak to open her eyes or move. She held her breath and listened carefully, keenly catching 2 other breathing sounds in the room. Her instincts, trained over the years, told her that she was not alone. The young man in a white coat put his hand into the basin, and the bright red blood instantly dyed the water blood red. He picked up a towel to dry his hands and asked half-jokingly, "Where did you pick this girl up from?" Rongyue turned her head to look at Fu Yunshin, who was sitting next to her, her eyes lazy but always fixed on Yi, and who was sleeping on the bed. Based on her injuries, she should have died long ago. It's unbelievable that she is still alive. Rongyue said in disbelief as she put the surgical tools into the toolbox. Fu Yunshin's eyes fell on Yi and's body wrapped in bandages. His eyes narrowed slightly with a dangerous coldness. "How did you get hurt?" "Falling from the building. Do you believe it?" Rongyu raised her eyes with a hint of confusion on her face. Rongyu said she had a brain injury, multiple fractures, soft tissue contusions all over her body, and a huge amount of intracerebral hemorrhage. "Apart from falling from a building, I really can't think of any other situation that could cause such serious injuries. I checked her and found that her nervous system was intact." At this point, he shook his head, playing with a scalpel in his hand, and muttered, I really want to cut open her brain to see how she survived." As soon as he finished speaking, he met Fu Yunshin's frosty gaze. Rongyue tactfully put away the scalpel and chuckled. Just kidding, just kidding." He packed up his things neatly and turned around to leave. After taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around and said seriously, "Mr. Fu, I am a top-grade military doctor." He emphasized the word top grade and said, "Please respect me, the angel in white." Fu Yunshin looked him up and down, the corners of his lips slightly raised, angel in white. Ronyu was very pleased with this address and was about to respond when Fu Yunshin interrupted her coldly. "Get lost." Rongyue pretended to be frustrated, sighed, and shuffled away. He secretly complained in his heart and finally understood why those doctors in novels who were always on call, did not reward if they cured the disease, and were buried with the doctor if they failed, were always full of helplessness. Wasn't he one of them? Fu Yunshin's gaze returned to the bed. She was wrapped in bandages, and the wounds that had just been sutured were still oozing blood. Fu Yunshin thought to himself, falling from a building? Such serious injuries must have been caused by either murder or suicide. But if she was committing suicide, she would never stop his car on the mountain road, calmly propose a deal, or even fulfill her promise. Therefore, the only possibility is that she was deliberately injured. Fu Yunshin remembered that the college uniform she was wearing was the uniform of Kyoto Zaiwaixing College, the top college in Kyoto, famous for its strict admission requirements and elite education. And she was able to drive calmly and confidently in such a situation, and even perform astonishing driving skills. This kind of ability is rare even among top drivers. Who is this girl? What has she been through? For the first time, Fu Yunshin felt an intense curiosity about something beyond his control. Yian's breathing gradually became steady in the quiet room, but she did not open her eyes. It was vital for her to recover her body. However, she felt a burning gaze on her from beginning to end, which was sharp and deep, just like the way Fu Yunshin examined her in the car. Yian didn't know how long he had slept. When he finally opened his eyes, what came into his sight was a simple, yet extremely luxurious room. Her hands, head, and legs were tied or hung with straps, and an infusion bottle was suspended above her, with the medicine dripping into her blood vessels through the syringe. She frowned, thinking that the medical methods here were too primitive. In the end times, technology and medicine have developed to the extreme. In cases like hers, usually a shot of cell regeneration hormone can activate new cells, quickly repair necrotic tissue, and restore physical fitness to peak condition. The room was empty at this time. She stared at the needle inserted in her arm. Suddenly, she had an idea, and the needle slowly slid out from between her flesh. Yian was delighted. Her supernatural power was still there. She realized that her superpowers had not disappeared, but her body was just too weak to support the use of her abilities. After this period of treatment, she felt that her recovery speed was unusual, as if she had returned to her former physical condition. This meant that her supernatural powers still existed, hidden but not lost. With the superpower, she felt a sense of peace in her heart. Although there was no clue about superpowers in the memory of this body, it did not mean that similar evolutionary abilities did not exist in this time and space. Yian has been recuperating here for 5 days. She knows very well that if she does not return to the Yi family as soon as possible, Yining will most likely spread the news of her death or disappearance, and the situation will become even more troublesome. Yian sat up with difficulty and reached out to pull out the infusion tubes one by one. "It seems that you are really not afraid of death." A cold voice came from the door. Yian looked up and saw a tall and handsome man leaning lazily against the door frame, watching her movements with a faint gaze. "It's you." Yian's tone was flat, without any ripples. "Thank you for saving my life, but I helped you win the game, so we're even now." Fu Yunshin frowned slightly. The girl in front of him was clearly about 16 or 17 years old, but her words were mature and cold, as if she had been through a lot, with a calmness and distance that did not belong to her age. He had already found out the information about this girl. Through her school uniform, he easily identified her identity, a student at Zaiwaixing Academy, the first high school in Kyoto. This school is exclusively for the upper class and powerful in Kyoto, and her identity is even more prominent. Yian, the granddaughter of former military general Yi Jiangwo, and the eldest daughter of current military colonel Yi Zhendong. "It's even?" He curled his lips and smiled. "I never said it was even." He approached, his figure tall and oppressive, shrouding Yian in shadow. His eyes swept over the blood oozing out from where she had just pulled out the needle, and his eyes couldn't help but darken. Yian raised his head, and looked at Fu Yunshin calmly. His voice was calm but cold. Since I have reached an agreement with you on the mountain road, then the deal has been concluded regardless of whether the conditions are equal or not. If you still want to get something from me, I'm sorry I won't accompany you. She always kept her word and never gave her enemies any leeway. If he insisted on pestering her, she would not mind taking action in this time and space to resolve the first obstacle. Fu Yunshin's eyes suddenly turned cold. He stared at Yin, and after a moment, he narrowed his eyes slightly. Although her murderous intent only flashed across his face, he clearly sensed the dangerous aura. You want to kill me? His voice was cold, like an icy blade scratching across the skin, carrying deadly danger. Yin looked back at him coldly and said lightly, I don't mind. Her hands were stained with blood countless times, so one more was nothing. Fu Yunshin narrowed his eyes slightly, and his tall figure slowly approached her until his nose bridge almost touched the tip of her nose, and the distance between them became almost zero. But I can take your life at any time. His deep voice was dangerous, but surprisingly pleasant to hear. Yin had a calm expression. Despite his injury, his back remained straight, revealing the calmness that came from years of training. You can try. She said it without a trace of fear, and even revealed a hint of challenge. Their eyes met in the air, and there was no trace of retreat in her black and white eyes. Fu Yunshin stood up, still hovering over her, his eyes probing. Yin was a little unhappy and said lightly, I want to leave. Woman, can't you speak more gently? As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to realize that he was wrong. He glanced at her thin figure, lingered on her chest for a moment, and raised the corner of his mouth. Oh no, you can't be considered a woman yet. Yin frowned slightly. She always spoke like this. What did gentleness mean? Seeing the contempt in his eyes, she said seriously, I'm still in the growth stage. I will grow up eventually. Fu Yunshin's mouth twitched, and he could not help but be speechless. Seeing that he seemed unconvinced, Yin added, Really? Fu Yunshin. He almost suspected that what he picked up was an alien creature. I'm leaving. Yin continued to pull out another needle inserted into his arm. Are you looking for death by leaving like this? Fu Yunshin said coldly, his tone revealing a hint of displeasure. Do you know how badly you are injured? Yin's expression remained unchanged. After a little thought, she realized that he had no ill intentions, so she said lightly, I won't die. My injuries have healed a lot. I must go back. Her firm eyes moved Fu Yunshin slightly. He threw a piece of clothing next to her, glanced at her bandaged body, and deliberately said in a somewhat difficult tone, Can you change it yourself? Yin frowned, remained silent for a moment, and replied calmly, Yes. Fu Yunshin raised his lips slightly and said with a smile, Put on your clothes and I will let you go. Otherwise, even if you can leave this room, you can't leave this manor. Yin stared at him calmly, knowing that he was right. She could feel that there were heavy security outside the manor. If this man didn't let her leave, she wouldn't be able to leave the manor, let alone the house. Yin looked down at his tattered clothes, thought for a moment, and then ripped them off and threw them on the ground. Fu Yunshin was stunned for a moment and turned around in an instant with a hint of gnashing teeth in his tone. You take off your clothes in front of a man, do you have any shame? He felt that the self-control and calmness he had accumulated over the past 20 years were easily broken by this girl. Would a normal girl be like this? But why did he turn around? Fu Yunshin suddenly felt a little regretful. There were so many women in this world who threw themselves at him and exposed their curves, but he actually avoided them just for a little bean sprout. Yin paused for a moment. Changing clothes was just a habitual operation for her during battles, and she had no shame in doing so. However, she glanced down at her pink clothes. This style was indeed a little awkward. While she was thinking, Fu Yunshin suddenly turned back and fixed his eyes on her. Yin raised his head, stared at him coldly, and said firmly, Turn around. Fu Yunshin looked at the rare blush on her face, and a hint of interest flashed in his eyes, as if he had discovered a new world. He crossed his arms across his chest and said 2 words calmly, Don't turn. A faint blush appeared on Yin's cheeks, but she quickly suppressed it. However, this subtle change was caught by Fu Yunshin, and the playfulness in his eyes became more intense. Yin bit his lower lip, knowing that it was useless to confront him head-on. He suppressed the anger in his heart, stared at him coldly, and began to get dressed with difficulty. The bandage on her arm made every step difficult for her, so she simply pulled and tore off the bandage that was in the way. Fu Yunshin frowned slightly, his eyes falling on the red and swollen skin on her arm. Yi Yan's broken arm had just been healed, and although the pain was unbearable, she still managed to put on her clothes without saying a word. He just watched her put on her clothes inch by inch. Although the movements were difficult, she remained silent. There was no sign of retreat or hesitation in her eyes, and she didn't even groan in pain. Get dressed, I'm leaving. Yi Yan's clothes hung loosely on her body, making her already petite figure look even more frail. Fu Yunshin responded coldly, okay. Yi Yan didn't say anything more and directly stood up from the bed, but because of his broken leg, his body was unstable and he stumbled forward and fell. Fu Yunshin watched coldly and did not come forward to help him. Yi Yan looked up at his calf. Although the bone had been reconnected, it would still be a little inconvenient for him to walk for the time being. She stood up again, walked towards the door step by step, straight and upright, without looking at Fu Yunshin again. The setting sun shone into the room through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The light and shadow intertwined on Fu Yunshin's face, outlining a few faint shadows, making him look charming and evil. What's your name? He suddenly asked, his voice coming from behind. Yi Yan paused slightly and replied calmly without turning his head. Yi Weigua. This was considered giving the full name, which was more polite. The corners of Fu Yunshin's mouth twitched slightly, but Yi Yan continued to walk out without looking back. Fu Yunshin looked at her figure walking away. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he picked up the phone and said coldly, let her go. Lu Qi dialed Fu Yunshin's number, full of doubts. Who was this girl? Not only was she the first woman that the young master brought back to the manor, but she was also the first woman that the young master personally instructed to be sent away. Although he was full of questions, he could not neglect the young master's orders. Lu Qi took out a remote control from his pocket and pressed a few buttons. In an instant, the manor's guards and remote intelligence system received instructions, and Yi Yan walked towards the gate unimpeded, and the door opened automatically when she approached. Yi Yan left calmly, not surprised by these modern security facilities. The technological means of the end of the world are far more complicated than this, but I couldn't help but feel a little curious about Fu Yunshin's identity. It seems that I have run into someone who should not be underestimated. I hope I won't get into trouble. Lu Qi put on a butler's suit, walked into the room, and said respectfully, Master, she has left. Fu Yunshin said lightly, his eyes stopped outside the window, his expression slightly displeased. Lu Qi continued, Master, the surveillance cameras outside the manor captured that young lady hailing a taxi and leaving to the south. He took out a notebook and said, the license plate number is... Did I ask you to remember the license plate number? Fu Yunshin interrupted coldly, with a barely perceptible anger in his tone. He didn't care where the woman was going, but after a pause he asked, What's the license plate number? Lu Qi was stunned for a moment, took out his notebook, and reported the license plate number. Fu Yunshin ordered in a cold voice, Find the company that owns this car and locate its route. Yes. Lu Qi quickly took the order and left. After Lu Qi left, Fu Yunshin's eyes fell on the scattered bandages and torn clothes on the bed, and his brows furrowed even tighter. Yi Yan? Yi family? Just then his cell phone suddenly rang. Yun Shun, the brothers are waiting for you in Tonkei Tower. We have booked the whole place to wait for you. Chin Su's voice came from the other end of the phone. Did you run naked? Fu Yunshin asked calmly. The voice on the other end of the phone suddenly lowered a few notes. Is it considered wearing pants? Fu Yunshin's lips curled up slightly, but his voice remained cold. No. Hey, wait. Yunshin, don't you want to know what happened to the girl you brought back that day? We just happened to have surveillance video on the mountain road. Pass it over. His tone brooked no refusal. His eyes narrowed slightly. That's not very nice of you. You were the one who initiated the bet. Tensu comrade-in-arms fi. Fu Yunshin rubbed his brows and finally said, Okay, I'll be there later. At the same time, Yi Yan's taxi stopped outside the Hongyuan Villa district. The driver looked back at her and said, Little sister, we've arrived. This villa district doesn't allow outside cars to enter. Yi Yan nodded and thanked him, took out 2 banknotes and placed them on the seat, pushed the door, and got out of the car, looking towards the heavily guarded Hongyuan Villa district. Hey, little sister, this is a lot of money, the driver shouted. After getting off the car, Yi Yan endured the pain in his body, stood up firmly, turned back and glanced at the driver calmly. Use the extra money to buy milk powder for the child. After saying that, she walked towards the Hongyuan Villa district without looking back. The driver was stunned for a moment, then looked down at the photo of the 1-month-old baby in the car and felt a warm feeling in his heart. To Yin, the money was not hers, so she didn't feel bad about spending it. It was the stack of banknotes that Fu Yunshin threw on the ground that night, and that she picked up. The gate of the Hongyuan Villa district was right in front of her. In the memory of this body, she knew that the people living here were either rich or noble. Many of them were retired military officers or high-ranking officials of wealthy families, and the Yi family lived here. Of course, in Kyoto, there are more similar high-end villa areas than just Hongyuan. Yin was wearing a loose white shirt that almost completely covered her college-style skirt, leaving only her legs exposed. She looked as thin as a piece of paper, as if she would be blown away by the wind at the slightest disturbance. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, focused her eyes slightly, and adjusted her state. After a few seconds, Yin moved his body again. The pain and discomfort had been alleviated a lot, and the wounds on the surface were no longer visible. He looked somewhat healthy again. She used her manipulation abilities to speed up the healing of surface injuries, at least making her look like a normal person, although deeper injuries would still take time to heal. Yin walked towards the villa area slowly and unhurriedly. May I say ye? The security guard greeted her with a smile. He was familiar with most of the residents in Hanyuan and could call them by name when he saw them. Yin nodded slightly and walked straight in. Looking at her steady steps, the security guard's heart moved, and he wondered secretly, why did Miss Yi look so good today? At this moment, in the Yi family's huge living room, the atmosphere at the dining table seemed to be frozen, depressing, and tense. It's been so many days, and there's still no news at all. What's going on? Yi Zhendong slammed the table angrily, his voice filled with suppressed anger. The people at the table were so frightened that they dared not breathe. Yi Ning was also a little uneasy, wondering why there was no news of Yi An's disappearance. Logically, the news of her death should have been announced long ago. Dad, I saw my sister going out to play with some male classmates that day. Maybe she was having so much fun that she forgot to contact home. Yi Ning consoled him softly in a gentle tone. Yi Zhendong's anger grew even stronger. At such a young age, she went out to hang out with her male classmates. She hasn't returned home for several days. She is lawless. Yang Zhidong, who was standing by, smiled slightly, picked up the spoon, and scooped a spoonful of soup for Yi Zhendong. With a hint of charm on her face, it's understandable that young people forget to go home because they are too playful, but staying out all night with a male classmate. If it gets out, it might affect your reputation. Her words undoubtedly added fuel to the fire. Yi Zhendong was so angry that he pushed her hand away, and his face became extremely gloomy. If I remember correctly, Yin seems to have not been back for 5 days. Yi Fei, the only teenager eating alone at the table, said lightly. Xiao Fei, what did you say? 5 days? Yi Zhendong's face changed slightly. Yi Fei took a sip of his drink and answered slowly. It seems so. Why didn't you call the police after 5 days? Yi Zhendong's eyes fell directly on Yang Zhidong and questioned. Because Yi Zhendong is a civil servant. He just returned home 2 days ago and had no idea that Yin had been missing for many days. Although he did not like his daughter and even hated her because of the will, she was his own flesh and blood after all, and the implications of her disappearance for 5 days made him dare not think too much about it. Yang Zhidong was speechless for a moment and turned to look at Yi Ning. Yi Ning immediately said, My mother and I thought my sister was playful and didn't pay much attention to it. Besides, my sister often went out with those male classmates, and everyone was used to it. Yang Zhidong also agreed. Yes, husband, you were too worried. Yin will be fine. It's not the first time that she has not returned home at night. Suddenly, a loud bang on the door broke the deadlock in the living room. Everyone was startled and looked towards the door. Sister Lin hurried to the door and saw a figure standing at the door against the light. His eyes swept over her coldly, making her shiver involuntarily and unable to recover for a moment. What happened? Yi Zhendong asked. Sister Lin finally reacted and quickly replied, Master, it's Miss and who's back? Yi Ning froze, her heart in her throat. Impossible. She should have died long ago. How could she be here? She looked towards the door in horror. Yin walked in step by step, his eyes calmly scanning everyone at the table. The only middle-aged man, with a military temperament and regular and stern features, was her father, Yi Zhendong. The woman in the red dress looked to be in her 30s, but looked like she was in her early 20s. She was her stepmother, Yang Zhidong. Yi Fei, a young man with a calm look, is her biological brother from the same mother. The girl who was cowering behind Yang Zhidong, with a look of fear on her face, was her younger sister Yi Ning, Yang Zhidong's daughter, who hated her to the core. When Yian's eyes fell on Yi Ning, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and he said coldly, "I'm back." Yi Ning was almost trembling with fear, and his heart was in a panic. Shouldn't this bitch be dead? How could she appear here intact? Are you a human or a ghost? Yi Ning almost blurted out, hiding his whole body behind Yang Zhitong. Yang Zhitong patted Yi Ning's hand, indicating that she had spoken out of turn. Ning, what nonsense are you talking about? Yian smiled slightly. His tone was cold and distant. It seems that Yi Ning doesn't welcome me back. Yi Ning widened her eyes and looked around timidly. Seeing that others were staring at her with questioning eyes, she swallowed hard. Yang Zhidong quickly tried to smooth things over and forced a smile. Ning has watched too many horror movies recently and has been having wild thoughts. As he said that, he glared at Yi and in dissatisfaction and scolded him. Look at you scared your sister like this. Where have you been fooling around these days? You didn't leave any news, and you came back so coldly. Do you still care about this family? Yang Zhidong scolded Yian like a hostess. Yian frowned. Yang Zhitong, her stepmother, hated her just as much as Yi Ning did. In such a large family, great importance is attached to the original wife, especially when the original wife has a very high status. Then the status of the second marriage and the second wife will be much lower than the original wife. Even according to the rules of this old-fashioned family, Yang Zhidong should respectfully call Yian's mother's sister and burn incense and kowtow to her. What's more, Yian's mother is the daughter of the chairman of Jingdu Ronghua Group, and although no one has said Yang Zhidong's identity, everyone knows it. This woman was brought back by Yi Zhindong after a one-night stand. Naturally, Yian's status in the family should not be low. No one knows how he ended up in the situation where he is not loved by his father and disliked by his brothers. Yi Zhindong slammed the table and glared at Yang Zhitong. He was the head of the family, so when was it her turn to speak? Only then did Yang Zhitong shut up and comfort Yi Ning. Yian sneered. Why did I come back just now? Yi Ning should know it very well, right? Looking at Yi Ning's expression, it seems that he thought I was dead. At this point, Yi Ning was no longer so scared. She knew that Yian was not dead at all. Maybe she just fainted that day. If Yian wanted to complain, as long as she denied it, her parents would not believe her at all. Sister, we have been worried about you these days, and I saw you leaving with those boys that day. That's why I was a little worried. Yi Ning looked a little aggrieved and leaned on Yang Zhitong. Yian, did you call my sister by her name? You have no manners at all. All these years of study have been in vain. You have no manners at all. Yi Zhindong couldn't help but scold Yian angrily. Yian's expression was indifferent, and his eyebrows slightly raised. I don't remember my mother giving birth to a sister for me. When these words came out, everyone present was stunned. Yi Fei, who had been eating with his head down, also raised his head and looked at Yian, this stern-voiced girl in front of him. Was she really his useless sister who only knew how to cry? Upon hearing this, Yang Zhidong immediately burst into tears. Zhindong, Yian doesn't recognize me as his mother. I have worked so hard for this family for so many years, raising 3 children. In the end, even the children don't recognize me. Well, okay. Yi Zhindong casually comforted Yang Zhidong. My mother is the daughter of the chairman of Kyoto Ronghua Group. What is her identity? There was some sarcasm in Yian's tone, and he was obviously suppressing Yang Zhidong's identity. After going out for a bit of wildness, you've become even more uneducated. Yi Zhindong was shaking with anger and shouted angrily. The military majesty made everyone's heart tremble. Tell me, where have you been these days? Have you done anything shameful again? Also, why are you like this now? Yi Zhindong pointed at Yian and asked 3 questions in a row. Yian was calm and composed. He glanced at Yi Ning and smiled strangely. This smile made Yi Ning's scalp tingle. 5 days ago, my sister told me that someone was looking for me outside the school. So I went. Unexpectedly, those people actually captured me. Later, I escaped from them with great difficulty. I was injured and fainted, but fortunately, I was rescued and I didn't come back until today. Yian explained calmly, and while she was speaking, it was obvious that the wounds on her body were still bleeding, but she seemed unaware of it. The scarlet blood was particularly eye-catching on the white shirt. Yi Fei frowned and even wanted to shout out those 2 words, but he finally held them back. There was a hint of worry in his eyes. Seeing this scene, Yi Zhindong was speechless for a moment. Yi Ning and Yang Zhidong were so scared that they huddled together. Yian smiled faintly, glanced at the food on the table, walked forward with upright steps, pulled out a stool, sat down, his back straight, his sitting posture even more standard than that of Yi Jindong, a soldier. Everyone at the table locked their eyes on her, and at this moment they were all eerily silent. Yin ate a few bites quickly and finished a whole bowl of rice. Another bowl. Yi Yan's words broke the eerily quiet atmosphere. Yes, Mrs. Mrs. Lin was stunned for a moment, then immediately stepped forward to serve Yi Yan. Everyone at the table. It was Yi Jindong who reacted first. Hurry up and apply the medicine. Sister Lin, take Ian back to the room. Sister Lin just served the rice and glanced at Ian. Mrs. Ian tapped the table heavily with his chopsticks and said in an imperative tone, eat first. After saying that, Ian quickly finished another bowl of rice. Once again, everyone's words were stuck in their throats. Ian eats very fast. In the past, in the apocalypse, they had no time to eat slowly. They had to stay alert at all times, and even eating had strict requirements. Otherwise, the enemy may launch a sneak attack on you or sneak up on you while you are eating. After eating, Ian felt that the hunger in his stomach was filled. He stood up and said, enjoy your meal. After that, he went upstairs to his room without paying any attention to everyone's looks as if he was a monster. After a while, Yi Zhendong looked at Yi Ning and said coldly, Ning, come to my study after dinner. Yi Ning was so frightened that his face turned pale. Yes. When he reached the stairs, a faint smile appeared on Yi Yan's lips. She had just deliberately opened her wound to increase the credibility of her words. With her current status in this family, Yi Zhendong would definitely not believe what she said. Seeing is believing, so it's better to give them a little scare. As for the hatred between her and Yi Ning, there is no need to rush at this moment. She always has the patience to hunt prey. Let's eat. After Yi Yan returned to his room, Yi Zhendong picked up his chopsticks and prepared to eat. But when he just reached out his chopsticks to the plate, he found that there were only a few pieces of food left on the table, not even a piece of meat. Yi Fei stared at the dining table. Something flashed in his eyes, and a smile appeared faintly at the corner of the serious boy's mouth. I also came to a conclusion in my mind that he has a big appetite and loves to eat meat. Yi Zhendong put down his chopsticks in frustration. Sister Lin, go make another one. Yes, sir. After Yi Yan returned to the room, a servant immediately brought him a medicine box. Miss Nin, do you need to call a doctor? The person who brought the medicine box was also a servant of the Yi family, but he was younger, about 20 years old, and his name was Shueli. Need not. After Yi Yan took the medicine box, he closed the door and started treating his wound himself. Although the wound was caused by herself, in order to look very serious, the wound was indeed broken quite severely. While treating his wound, he glanced around his room. The room is full of girly pink, and there are all kinds of stuffed toys everywhere. There was a strange-looking guy lying on the bed, and Yi was a little curious. He walked to the bed and picked up the stuffed toy, carefully searching his mind for the name of the doll. Peppa Pig? What the hell? In the memory, this guy with a pink nose that looked bigger than his head was actually a famous star in the Xinglu Empire. Many people even liked it so much that they tattooed it on their bodies. Anything related to this pig would be snapped up immediately. There is also a saying that has swept the entire Xinglu Empire. Tattoo Peppa Pig on your body. Applause to the social people. A pig actually set off a crazy fashion storm. Yi Yan suddenly felt that she didn't quite understand the popular trends of this time and space. At the end of the world, the most popular things were the latest high-tech products or new heavy weapons. As the first commander of the Eastern Military Region, Yi Yan was the first to get and experiment with each of them. He shook his head and threw the pink thing aside. Although Yi Yan personally prefers the simple and clean military green, he is not averse to these colors. After stopping the bleeding from the wound, I rested for a while, took a shower, changed my clothes, and lay down on the bed to rest. Bronze Sparrow Tower. The so-called Bronze Sparrow Tower is the largest entertainment club in Kyoto. As long as you have money, you can do whatever you want in this place. Even if you want to watch a live sex show here, someone will arrange it for you. The top young men from Kyoto's aristocratic circles are undoubtedly frequent visitors to this place. For the people in Tonkei Tower, they are living gods of wealth. What's more, this group of people not only have money but also power. As soon as Fu Yunshin stepped in with his leather shoes, someone came forward to greet him. Before he had taken a few steps, all the staff around him stopped and greeted him with a smile. Mr. Fu. As expected, the entire place was reserved. There was not a single guest in the Tonkei Tower. The layout and construction of the Bronze Sparrow Tower are very similar to those of a palace. But unlike the solemnity of a palace, it has a more romantic and extravagant feel. Fu Yunshin didn't even need to say a word. Mr. Fu, please come this way. Mr. Chun and the others are waiting for you upstairs. Fu Yunshin nodded lightly and followed her up the stairs on the two wings. Yunshin, you are here. As soon as I entered the hall, I saw a group of young men with their clothes half open. Almost every one of them was hugging a girl and drinking. Some of them even touched the women next to them from time to time, making the women scream. Fu Yunshin raised a rogue smile and put one hand in his trouser pocket. It seems that Xiao Yang and Chun Su have suffered heavy losses this time. Ha ha ha. There was a burst of joking laughter in the hall. Yunshin, my heart is bleeding. Xiao Yang covered his chest with his hands, beating his chest and stamping his feet. I shouldn't have made a bet with you. This is 2 months' salary for me. Fu Yunshin smiled and raised his eyebrows. Really? Come to think of it, I just gave Lu Qi a tip a few days ago, which seems to be almost equal to your 2-month salary. Damn it, there is no harm without comparison. Xiao Yang yelled in a low voice in dissatisfaction, and then immediately changed his tone and asked in a flattering manner, Does your family still need servants? This made everyone present laugh, and they all looked down on him. Boss Xiao, where is your moral integrity? Ha ha ha, Boss Xiao, have you fed your moral integrity to the dogs? Is Master Fu's family still short of servants? Can you take me with you? That's right. Chun Su stroked his forehead, feeling very disappointed. You guys really, do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have money? Fu Yunshin smiled slightly, took out a check from his pocket, and signed. Today's game is on me. After signing, he handed it to the waiter next to him. Chun Su and Xiao Yang looked at each other, their eyes shining, and they flattered each other tacitly. Do whatever you want, do whatever you want. If you have money, you can do whatever you want. Come on, Mr. Fu, please sit down quickly. Let me massage your shoulders. Xiao Yang, Chun Su, and Fu Yunshin, everyone in the Kyoto Circle knows that these three can be considered the Iron Triangle. Because of their family background, the three of them had known each other since childhood. When they grew up, they all became the leaders of this group of playboys. This circle consists of the children of all high-ranking officials of the Kyoto Empire. However, since Fu Yunshin took over the family business a year ago, he rarely hung out with these people. Even though Xiao Yang and Chun Su are fawning on Fu Yunshin, in fact, any one of them would be a figure that could make both the military and political circles tremble. In addition to their own identities, there is also their family background. After Fu Yunshin arrived, everyone's enthusiasm became even higher, and after a few drinks, some people started playing some obscene games. Give me the thing. Fu Yunshin was naturally not interested in these things and spoke directly to Chun Su. Xiao Yang patted Fu Yunshin's shoulder with his big hand. Yunshin, don't be anxious. It's a rare holiday for me, and we haven't been together for a long time. Let's have some fun first. Xiao Yang has handsome features and a tall stature, which is the type of guy most women like. So Xiao Yang has quite a lot of romantic debts, and he changes girls outside one after another. Although Chun Su has a pair of peach blossom eyes, he is a germaphobe. Even if he goes out with a girl, he will only want virginity. The only one who could be considered clean is probably Fu Yunshin. Although Fu Yunshin has been involved in many scandals with women over the years, Xiao Yang and Chun Su both know that Fu Yunshin is the only monk who does not eat meat. So they always try their best to turn Fu Yunshin into a complete man. However, every time the idea was not put into practice, it was strangled to death by Fu Yunshin. I don't want to repeat what I said a second time. Fu Yunshin curled the corners of his mouth slightly, looking at Xiao Yang and Chun Su with a half smile. The threat in his eyes was very obvious. Chun Su touched his nose and said, Okay, let's talk about this somewhere else. They still have vivid memories of what happened after they offended Fu Yunshin, when all the negative information about them was spread everywhere. Fu Yunshin followed their advice and stood up and changed rooms with them. Chun Su pressed a button on the remote control, and a 3D projected image appeared in front of them. And that scene was exactly the scene of a body being dumped from an unlicensed van. I saw 2 young men carrying a young girl who looked dead directly from the van and throwing her into the woods. Then they looked around and drove away. Fengshan, we only have surveillance cameras near the driveway. Those people came from the small road, so we can't capture where they came from, and we don't know where they went afterwards. Chun Su leaned lazily on the sofa, talking as he watched. Xiao Yang also stood straight with his legs apart, his hands on his chest, looking at the surveillance camera in front of him. Those 2 people were probably gangsters. Their car was a common Jinbei car, which was not very recognizable. Judging from their expressions, they thought the girl was dead. Xiao Yang used to be a scout, so he observed these things very carefully. Fu Yunshin suddenly said, "Enlarge it." The current scene is just stopping at the scene where one of the men is dragging the girl. Chun Su was stunned for a moment, then pressed the remote control again, and immediately the girl's face became clearer. But the blood flowing from her forehead across her face made her face look a little scary. Xiao Yang frowned. There is damage to the brain, probably from some serious injury. There are no obvious external injuries on the body, and he was not attacked by others. Xiao Yang thought about it. She must have fallen from a high ground. The people who caused her to fall were those two people. Fu Yunshun continued, with a hint of coldness in his eyes. I say, Yunshun, was it really her who was racing in Fengshan last time? Chun Su was half believing and half doubting. Although the surveillance video did show the girl sitting in the driver's seat, this was more unbelievable than an international joke, okay? At this point, Xiao Yang also became interested. By the way, Yunshun, didn't you bring her home? How is she now? Fu Yunshin looked at the enlarged little face in the projection screen and answered the two people's questions concisely and clearly. It's her. She's gone. Xiao Yang and Chun Su looked at each other and raised their eyebrows. It seemed that something was not quite right with Fu Yunshin. As if he had been sitting for too long, Fu Yunshin twisted his neck, making a crisp bone sound. Do you know who she is? Fu Yunshin raised his lips. Xiao Yang stared at Fu Yunshin for a while and did not answer Fu Yunshin's question, but sighed deeply. Yunshin, you're lucky you didn't let those lonely buddies in the army see you. With your looks, you're more attractive than a woman. Before Xiao Yang finished his teasing words, Chun Su could already foresee his fate, and he was very prescient in just sitting there and watching the show. Sure enough, Fu Yunshin's face turned dark in an instant. He turned to look at Xiao Yang and suddenly stared at him and smiled. Xiao Yang felt cold all over, and his hair stood on end. It seems that Tonkei Tower is recruiting male PR recently. I think Xiao Yang is a perfect fit. You have a big penis and are good at work. Your power is even greater than that of an intercontinental missile. Do you want me to call the manager over now to measure your size and start working right away? As soon as Fu Yunshin finished speaking, Xiao Yang staggered and almost fell. Chun Su was just trying to hold back his laughter, but this time he couldn't hold it back any longer. Oh my God! This is possible. I'm going to post this right away. How should the Imperial Major handle himself when he goes astray and embarks on the path of a male PR? Waiting online, it's urgent. Chun Su became more and more excited as he spoke. As soon as he picked up his phone, Xiao Yang glanced at him. Of course, Chun Su was just joking, and this time he laughed so hard that he fell backwards. Xiao Yang, are you happy about this? Why tease Fu Yunshin when you can tease anyone else? Isn't this just pushing yourself into the fire pit? After all, Fu Yunshin's methods are really capable of turning Xiao Yang into a male PR. There is no doubt about this. Xiao Yang stopped being naughty and blushed. Fortunately, his skin was wheat-colored, so it wasn't too obvious. He coughed lightly and said, "Let's talk about the identity of that girl." Fu Yunshin had a smile on his face, with a hint of sarcasm. This Xiao Yang is just too thick-skinned and needs some training. By the way, Yunshin, who is that girl? Chun Su was also curious. The granddaughter of Yi Zhengluo, the former general of the Imperial Army, and the daughter of Yi Zhendong, the current colonel of the Imperial Army. Yi Weigua, Fu Yunshin said slowly, word by word, and paused, also called Yin. When they heard the name Yi Weigua, Xiao Yang and Chun Su's faces were obviously a little uncomfortable. There's no girl with this name. However, they had heard of the Yi family, which was one of the few old military families in the Kyoto Circle. Fu Yunshin raised his eyes and glanced at Chun Su meaningfully. Come to think of it, she was also your former schoolmate. Kyoto Zaiweixing Academy. Chun Su blurted out. Ziwei Star is the star of the Emperor. In other words, those who come out of Ziwei Star Academy will definitely become the next successor of the Empire in the future. It is the gathering place for all the children of the nobles and high-ranking officials in Kyoto. That's right. Fu Yunshin narrowed his eyes, took out his cell phone, and made a call. Mommy, baby, you finally decided to call me? Oh, my sweetheart, I found a daughter-in-law for you. Ah, what? Say it again. The wind was too loud, and I couldn't hear you clearly. Well, you'll have a daughter-in-law soon. My son is Ovisuma. Whose son is he? What does he look like? How old is he this year? Send a photo to Mommy. Fu Yunshin simply and rudely informed her and hung up the phone. He played with the phone in his hand with a smile on his face. Xiao Yang and Chun Su were stunned. What did they just hear? Fu Yunshin actually said that he was in love? Is this news really that explosive? Wait, does Fu Yunshin know what love means? Does he think that being interested in her means being in love? And his feelings are at most one-sided. The girl may not necessarily like him. But when they saw Fu Yunshin looking at the girl's face on the big screen with a smile on his face, the two of them really couldn't bear to say it out loud. This is really a unilateral announcement. Yin had a good sleep at home and looked at the time after waking up. I only rested for an hour. Miss Anin, the master asked you to go to the study. Shueli shouted outside. I understand. Yin responded, frowned, put on some clothes, and went out. Before I even entered the study, I heard Yi Jindong's scolding voice. Tell me, did you collude with outsiders to harm your sister? Yi Jindong was able to sit in his current position not only by relying on his relationship. From Yian's words, it is obvious that if it were not for Yi Ning, Yian would not have been in any danger at all. Dad, believe me, I have never done anything to harm my sister. If I knew those people were bad people, I would never let my sister go with them, Yi Ning said while crying. Really? You don't know those people? Yi Jindong expressed his doubt. Yes, I don't know them at all. Those people are not from our school. I saw them playing with my sister before, so I thought they were very familiar with each other, and they should be fine. Who knew they would hurt my sister? Yi Ning sobbed and defended herself. At this time, Yin walked into the study. She looked at Yi Ning, then at Yi Jindong. Dad. Yin, Ning Ning said that you know those people? If you know them, you can't blame your sister. You made friends carelessly, and yet you try to shirk responsibility. We in the Yi family have never had such a rule, Yi Jindong said with a serious expression and righteous words. In his eyes, what Yi Ning said was obviously more credible. The closeness is obvious. Also, you are from my Yi family, but you were hanging out with those people. You have no shame, but my Yi family still has. Yi Jindong became angrier as he spoke. Yin stood straight, and after listening to Yi Jindong's lecture, he replied calmly, I don't know them. Snap, snap, snap. The sound of a silent slap rang out in the air. Just a few words made Yi Jindong feel embarrassed. Yin looked at Yi Ning and smiled. However, I see Yi Ning often with them. Yi Ning was panicked in her heart, but pretended to be calm on the surface. She looked at Yin with grievance. Sister, I know it's my fault. I shouldn't have listened to them and asked you to come over. But I really didn't expect that they would hurt you. Whoa. But I clearly often saw you playing with them. You can't slander me. Yi Ning sniffed, his eyes red. I know you don't like me, but you can't wrongly accuse me. Although I'm still young, but Dad said that people should have backbone and not suffer losses that they shouldn't suffer. So, sister, I will not admit to something I didn't do. Yi Ning's words touched Yi Jindong's heart. Integrity is the traditional heritage of military families. Now he is more certain that Yin is lying. I don't know when backbone became lying and deceiving people. Yin sneered and spoke sharply. Yi Jindong got angry. Yin frowned. Yi Jindong didn't believe her. I thought you would be quiet after being injured, but I didn't expect you to be so unrepentant. Not only are you shameless enough to hang out with those thugs outside, but you also dare to lie and slander your sister. You are a disgrace to our Yi family. We don't have a daughter like you in my Yi family. Yi Jindong cursed fiercely. His voice was so rough and powerful that Yi Ning shrank back in fear. When did you treat me as your daughter? Yin? Ning Ning? When did you treat me and Yi Ning equally? You believe what she says, but you treat my words as shit. Yin questioned. She also asked this question on behalf of the original owner of this body. Although both are Yi Jindong's daughters, Yi Jindong treats them very differently. It can be said that Yi An's existence was almost completely ignored. Yi Jindong was so angry that he subconsciously took out a pistol from the drawer. But as soon as he took it out, he reacted and immediately placed the pistol heavily on the table. At this time, Yang Zhitong, who was hiding outside the study, couldn't stop smiling. Little bitch, let's see what you can do this time. Yin ignored Yi Jindong and questioned Yi Ning step by step. You said that I knew those people, so why don't you tell me? When and where did you see me with them? What did you do? There should be surveillance in the school, right? As long as you can tell us, we can verify it one by one. What do you think? Yi Ning's eyes were filled with panic, and he was frightened by Yi An's overwhelming momentum and took a few steps back. When did Yi An become so sharp-tongued? Didn't Yi An always accept everything? And his reaction was slow and stupid. How could this happen? Yi Jindong also looked at Yi Ning. You say, who knew that Yi Ning suddenly started crying. Well, Dad, don't you believe me either? Just when the atmosphere in the study was at a stalemate, Mrs. Lin suddenly knocked on the door and came in. Master, this was just delivered to you by someone who specifically asked me to deliver it to you personally. Give it here. Yi Jindong took the bag, tore it open, and a large stack of photos immediately slipped out from it. After looking at the stack of photos, Yi Jindong's face turned from gloomy to dark. He stood up directly and slapped Yi Ning to the ground with a slap. This slap stunned Yi Ning and made him dizzy. Dad! She looked at Yi Jindong in disbelief. Yang Jidong was so scared that she immediately ran in from outside the door and helped Yi Ning up, feeling heartbroken. Jindong, what are you doing? What? Take a good look. Who has your daughter been hanging out with all day? Yang Jidong and Yi Ning immediately picked up the photos on the ground. There are photos of Yi Ning and a group of gangsters on it, and there are also photos of Yi and being kidnapped by them. Yi Ning's face changed drastically after seeing it. No, Dad, these pictures must be composited by them. Yes, Jindong, you can't doubt Ning based on these photos. He glared at Yi and fiercely. It must be Yi and who had someone deliberately synthesized these photos. You can't be fooled by her. Ning has been obedient since she was a child. How could she possibly hang out with these people? Can I tell whether the photo is composite or not? Yi Zindong glared at Yang Zitong angrily. Yang Zitong suddenly didn't dare to speak. Yi Jindong is a soldier and a colonel at that. How could he not see through these clumsy tricks? Look at what your daughter has become now. From today on, Yi Ning cannot leave the house for 2 months except for going to school, and her monthly pocket money will be cut in half for the next 6 months. Yi Ning burst into tears out of grievance, and Yang Jidong started crying too. Yin watched the scene expressionlessly, only slightly raised his eyebrows, obviously watching a show. Looking at the photos on the ground, I was a little confused. Who sent these photos at this time? In Yi Jindong's opinion, Yi Ning simply made the wrong friends and harmed Yi and without knowing it. So he just scolded him and beat him and let it go. But for Yi Ning, this was the first time she had received such a severe punishment since she was a child. It was also the first time Yi Jindong hit her. She blamed all her new and old grudges on Yin and glared at her fiercely, as if she wanted to eat her. Yang Jidong also glared at her, then comforted Yi Ning and went back to the room while coaxing her. After dealing with Yi Ning, only Yin and Yi Jindong were left in the study. At this moment, Yin seemed to hear the sound of being slapped in the face again. And then Dad was a little emotional just now and wrongly accused you. Don't take it to heart. We are all family, so let it go. My sister didn't mean it. You should be careful in the future. You are the daughter of my Yi family, and it will not be good for your reputation if you spend the night outside. If anything happens, go home immediately. Yi knew that Yi Jindong was blaming her for staying outside for 5 days before returning home. Smiling faintly, do you want me to bring my body back? Yi Jindong was speechless for a moment, and then became angry at Yi An's rebuttal tone. Yi took a last deep look at the photos on the ground. I'm going back to my room. After saying that, Yi turned around and left the study. Yi Jindong looked at Yi An straight back, slammed the table heavily, and a burst of anger came out of his nostrils. He glanced at the pistol on the table, and then he remembered that when he took out the gun just now, Yi didn't even blink and didn't show any fear at all. He stared at the gun, his eyes slightly thoughtful. After Yi returned to the room, he spread out his palms. In her palm, the photo that had just fallen to the ground suddenly appeared. It was a scene where Yi Ning was with a few ruffian men. Just now, when Yi Jindong was not paying attention, she used her supernatural power to absorb one of the photos into the palm of her hand. Looking at the man in the photo, his eyes suddenly turned cold. It turned out that he was the one who killed the original owner of this body. But who was the person who sent this photo? And what was his purpose? Moreover, it just happened to be delivered at this time. Suddenly, Yi An's expression changed and a face appeared in his mind. Was it him? Purple Garden. Master, the stuff has been delivered. Lu Qi, dressed in a tuxedo, bowed respectfully, very gentlemanly. In front of Fu Yunxin, on the projection screen, all the information about a girl in a college uniform was shown, including videos and photos. Fu Yunxin nodded, picked up the cup of coffee, put it to his lips, took a sip, and said softly. His eyes were fixed on the screen. Look at her appearance. She is completely different from what is shown in the information. From the information shown on the screen, this girl named Yin, apart from her background, there is nothing outstanding about her. Studying, last in the grade. In terms of sports, I'm at the bottom of my class. I failed several subjects every semester. It can be said that he is a fighting loser among the poor students. But Fu Yunshin always felt that there was something strange and bizarre about this. Lu Qi, Zaiweixing Academy will start school the day after tomorrow, right? Yes, sir. Fu Yunshin looked at the scene on the screen in front of him and tapped his fingers on the coffee table a few times. It's just right. Come with me to Zaiweixing College the day after tomorrow. Let's talk about funding the construction of a scientific research institute on campus. Lu Qi raised his eyebrows slightly. The young master's real intention is not to stay in the bar. But he still nodded respectfully. Yes, I'll arrange it right away. Thinking of the scene when Yian left that day, Fu Yunshin sighed and lit a cigarette impatiently. Smoke swirled around my fingertips, and as I watched the images on the screen, I felt an indescribable irritation in my heart. Want to see her? Yes, that's what I was thinking. But this thought made Fu Yunshin feel so useless that he wanted to slap himself twice. This guy is still a minor. Underage? Cultivation? Fu Yunshin suddenly felt it seemed not bad. He leaned back, crossed his long legs, and placed them on the coffee table, his eyes slightly narrowed. Yian, what kind of person are you? Yian, who had no idea that he was being targeted, was looking through all the things about him in his room. At this moment, her mobile phone suddenly received a text message. Come out. I'll wait for you in the corridor on the left. Yian glanced at the text message, sneered, and then opened the door and walked to the place agreed in the text message. The corridor on the left is a relatively narrow space, and usually no one from home would come here. Moreover, it is still early in the morning and almost everyone in the house is asleep. Yian walked in and found it was pitch black. He wanted to turn on the light, but it was broken and wouldn't turn on no matter how hard he pressed it. Suddenly, a breathing sound was heard behind Yian Yi and reacted very quickly and dodged the attack from the person behind him by turning sideways. She saw a figure in the darkness. It was Yi Ning. Yi Ning was holding an iron rod in his hand. Out of habit, Yin could see things even in the dark after just 3 seconds of adaptation. But it takes some time for ordinary people to adapt. For example, Yi Ning was at a loss after Yi and dodged her attack. The reason why she was able to attack Yi accurately just now was only because she secretly saw Yi In's position from behind, but now she had no idea where Yi In was. Bitch, if you have the guts, don't hide. Yi Ning roared viciously, waving the iron rod in his hand wildly, stepping back in fear, his eyes fixed on the darkness around him. She took advantage of this opportunity to teach Yi In a lesson. She knew that the villas were all very soundproof, especially this place. Even if she shouted here, no one in the room would hear what was happening. Moreover, Yin was already injured, so even if he got injured again, it couldn't be blamed on her. Yin smiled. If you have the ability, can you find me? She was just taking advantage of the blind spot of her vision, and it was dark, so even if Yi Ning slowly adapted to the darkness, he couldn't find her at all. What's more, there is an essential difference in the way the two of them see in the dark. Yi In's teasing tone angered Yi Ning even more, bitch. Before he could finish the next word, Yi Ning felt a burning pain on his face. He was knocked to the ground by the force. Ah! Yi Ning screamed and was about to get up. Ah! Another shrill scream. Yi Ning's hand was stomped hard on the ground by a foot. Yi In bent down, looked into Yi Ning's eyes, and held Yi Ning's jaw tightly with one hand. Has no one taught you what politeness is? Only at this time could Yi Ning see Yi In's outline clearly. The difference from before was that Yi In now was particularly terrifying, especially those sharp eyes that glowed in the dark. When he stared at her, he was like a beast staring at its prey, so cold that it made people's whole body go cold. Let me go. If Dad knew you did this to me, he would beat you to death. Yi Ning roared angrily. If he knew that you were the one who hired someone to kill someone and also wanted someone to rape me, do you think he would beat you to death? Yin asked calmly. Yi Ning's confidence dropped a lot in an instant, but he still refuted, I didn't. No. What I hate most is people who tell liars. Yi In's eyes turned cold. Bang! A loud slap sounded in this small corner. Whoa! Yi Ning whimpered in pain. You can't hit me. Who do you think you are? You motel beach. Pa! Yin slapped him hard again. Yi Ning gasped for breath, glared at Yi In with resentment, glanced at the iron rod next to him, and suddenly grabbed the iron rod with his other hand, trying to get up from the ground. But as soon as she moved, the iron rod suddenly disappeared from her hand. When she reacted, the iron rod was already against her forehead. Yi Ning suddenly didn't dare to move. How could it be? How did that iron rod end up in Yi In's hands? Do you know what word is used to describe someone like you? Yi Yin's tone was neither salty nor bland, with a hint of a smile on the corner of his mouth. Green tea bitch. Yi Ning gritted her teeth. The pain from having her hand stepped on was so severe that she wanted to bite Yi Yin to death. Yi Yin smiled and then moved his feet down. Yi Ning's hand was finally freed, but it was already deformed from being stepped on. She cried in pain and glared at Yi Yin fiercely. From now on, you'd better behave yourself. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I will no longer want to keep you alive. She threatened coldly. Yi Ning got goosebumps all over his body and felt a chill down his spine. It seemed as if all the words were stuck in his throat and couldn't come out. After Yi Yin finished speaking, he threw down the iron rod in his hand and remembered something. Oh, and don't do this kind of sneak attack from behind in the future. Otherwise, if I'm not careful and hit too hard. Yi Yin didn't finish the rest of his words. He just smiled slightly, but this smile was more creepy than what he said. Yi Ning knew what Yi Yin meant without even thinking. He sobbed, shaking his twisted and deformed hand. Damn Yi Yin, how could this happen? Why did he suddenly become a different person? Yi Ning felt that he had never been so embarrassed before. She is always pampered whether at school or at home. But since Yi Yin came back this time, Yi Ning felt like a helpless clown being teased. Yi Yin, why didn't you die? Why? If she had known earlier, she should have stabbed Yi Yin twice so that she wouldn't come back. Yi Ning's heart was full of resentment at the moment. She had never wanted Yi Yin to die as much as she did now. Yi Yin looked into those eyes. Yi Ning's eyes were full of anger, destruction, and hatred. Suddenly, I changed my mind and decided that this person must not be kept. His eyes narrowed, and a layer of blue flames rose in his eyes. Yi Ning suddenly felt a biting chill for no apparent reason. Her throat began to tighten as if someone was strangling her, and she was unable to move her whole body. The sound of steady breathing nearby reached Yi Yan's ears. Her eyes changed. She glanced at Yi Ning and walked away. After she left, Yi Ning finally felt the air he breathed in, gasping for air. As soon as Yi Yin walked out of the corridor, he turned sideways and looked to the other side. The young man was seen leaning against the wall, his hands in his trouser pockets, looking at Yi Yin meaningfully. It's Yi Fei. Yi Yin frowned slightly, then turned around and went back to his room. Yi Fei also stood up straight and only turned around and went back to his room after seeing Yi Yin enter the room. A storm was silently covered up in the darkness. However, the three younger generations of the Yi family all had their own thoughts that night. After Yi Yin returned to his room, he did some exercises to recover his body while recalling what had just happened. Yi Fei, 15 years old, is Yi Yan's biological brother. He is the person closest to me in this family, but our relationship is like that of strangers. According to the memory of this body, the relationship between the siblings was very good when they were young. However, as Yi Yin and Yi Fei grew up, Yi Yin's personality became more and more withdrawn, and he rarely spoke even to his own brother. Gradually, the two became more and more estranged, and even became strangers. Although they went to the same school, Yi Ning and Yi Fei were both top students in the school, while Yi Yin was at the bottom. With Yi Ning's interference, Yi Yin almost became the target of bullying and ridicule by the entire school. Yi Fei, who is excellent in all aspects, naturally does not want to have any contact with such a sister, and has never helped his sister. Yi Yin twisted his neck, making a cracking sound, and sat straight on the chair, looking at his weak and thin body in the mirror. No matter what, the first thing she had to do was to restore her physical strength. My body is too weak now, and the abilities I can use are minimal. After teaching Yi Ning a lesson that night, Yi Ning seemed to be much more obedient. However, the redness and swelling on his face and the fractured palm still aroused the doubts of Yang Zhitong and Yi Zhendong. I accidentally fell when I went out at night, and my hand was crushed by the cabinet. Yi Ning answered aggrievedly. But when he said this, he deliberately glanced at Yi Yin, and the disgust and hatred in his eyes were obvious. Yi Zhendong also looked at Yi Yin. Does my sister's injury have anything to do with you? As soon as Yi Yin came downstairs, he heard Yi Zhendong's question and looked at Yi Ning. Do you think it has anything to do with me? Yi Ning bit her lower lip, thinking of what Yi Yin said to her that night, and forced a smile from the corner of her mouth. It has nothing to do with my sister. Yi Ning's tone was obviously aggrieved and afraid. Yang Zhidong stared at Yi Yin. It must be Yi, and who caused her precious daughter to become like this. After Zhendong left, she would see how she would deal with this little bitch. After hearing what Yi Ning said, Yi Zhendong didn't ask any more questions. He He packed up his things, gave some instructions to Yang Zhidong, Yi Ning, and Yi Fei, and left home. The only person who didn't speak was Yin. After all, this daughter, although he was not close to her, was the one who had surpassed him in inheriting the Yi family's property. Today is not only the day Yi Zhindong leaves, but also the day Zaiweixing Academy opens. After Yi Ning got into the car, he immediately urged, "Drive." "But mi sana, te drivere. Who told you to wait for her? Drive," Yi Ning said angrily. "Yes, miss." This driver had just arrived recently, so he didn't know the actual relationship between Yi Ning and Yin. In the past, almost all of the Yi family's cars belonged to Yi Ning exclusively. As soon as Yin walked out of the gate, he saw the rear end of a car driving away. Ding dee. At this moment, a long blast of a horn suddenly sounded in Yi Yan's ears. A black convertible stopped in front of Yi Yan. Yi Fei. Yi Yan saw the person in the car and greeted him lightly. The young man sitting in the driver's seat of the car was Yi Fei. Yi Fei was wearing a college uniform today, which made him look even more energetic and handsome, full of youthfulness. Yi Fei looked at Yi Yan with some surprise on his face. Although Yi Yan was still wearing the college uniform as usual, he was not wearing a skirt. Instead, he was wearing long pants and a white shirt. His long hair, which was originally longer than his chest, was cut to just reach his shoulders. At first glance, it's hard to tell whether he's a man or a woman, and he looks more like a beautiful young man with a rebellious air. Yi Yan's address made Yi Fei frown, as if he was not very satisfied with this address. "Get in the car?" he asked coldly. Yi Yan was playing with a pair of car keys in her hand. In fact, she had a car in the basement garage. It was a gift from her grandfather on her 16th birthday. But Yi Yan didn't know how to drive before, so he was always stuck in the garage. "I originally wanted to drive to school by myself, but since I had a ride, I might as well take it." Yi Yan responded to Yi Fei's words directly with action. He opened the door, got in the car, and sat in the passenger seat. Yi Fei glanced at Yi Yan, stepped on the car, and it started. On the way, neither of them said a word. Yi Yan is not a talkative person, and he would be concise as long as he can. "You have changed," Yi Fei said suddenly. Yi Yan's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise, but his expression remained calm, as usual. Yeah. She had no intention of hiding it. The car suddenly braked suddenly. If Yi Yan hadn't been relatively steady, an ordinary person would have crashed into it. "You are not her." Yi Fei's tone suddenly became heavy, and he stared at Yi Yan with sharp eyes. At this time, the 15-year-old boy was completely cold and indifferent to his age. Yi Yan slowly turned his head and looked at Yi Fei with a smile on his face. "When we were little, you loved to chase me for orange-flavored lollipops." The coldness in Yi Fei's eyes gradually faded away, and a different emotion appeared in his eyes. Yi Yan looked ahead. No one will always be a weak person. It's just that they lack an opportunity to grow. Yi Fei stared blankly at Yi Yan, who was sitting next to him. It was her, but it didn't look like her. He carefully thought about what Yi Yan had just said. Could it be that she really had changed because of these things? Yi Yan suddenly smiled and looked at Yi Fei. "Do you want a strong sister who can protect you, or a weak sister who can be bullied by everyone?" Her eyes were firm, staring straight at Yi Fei, making him speechless for a moment. Yi Yan knew that her change did not happen overnight, and it was better to give those close to her a heads-up in advance than to make random suspicions. Moreover, since she had taken over Yi Yan's body, she had become Yi Yan. She could not get rid of anything related to this body. Yi Fei frowned and said nothing. He turned around, stepped on the pedal, and the car started moving again. "That depends on whether you have the ability," Yi Fei said lightly and with some contempt. Yi Yan curled the corners of his lips, his smile unclear. After taking Yi Fei's ride, they arrived at the gate of Zaiweixing Academy in a short while. At the gate of the college, a row of luxury cars were parked in a neat and uniform manner. You can recognize the brand and model of every luxury car as soon as you see it. After Yi Yan got off the car, Yi Fei didn't even look at her and walked towards the school gate with his bag on his back. Yi Yan didn't find it strange, as Yi Fei and her relationship wasn't good to begin with. The sun was already rising in the west when he took her to school today. Looking at the gate of Zaiweixing Academy in front of me, this is the Imperial Star School, Zaiweixing Academy. I chuckled, it's quite interesting. Yi Yan carried his bag in one hand and walked straight into the gate of Zaiweixing School. The class hasn't started yet, and most of the students are still walking to the classroom. Yi Yan walked among the crowd and soon attracted the attention of some people. Her facial features were originally pretty, but because of her introverted personality, she always walked with her head down, so her face was easily overlooked. Now Yi Yan holds his head high, wearing a white shirt and a bow tie, with side bangs covering his forehead and hair that just reaches his shoulders, which has a hint of flamboyance and unruliness. He looks like a cold boy who walked out of a comic book. No, it's an abstinent, sexually indifferent boy. Many girls passing by fixed their eyes on Yin. They did not recognize her at first and thought she was a new transfer student, and a boy at that. Yin has a military temperament in his bones. When he brings that trait to his current self, the coldness easily covers up his original femininity. Is that the new transfer student? Whose is that? I don't know. Huh. Why do I feel like he looks a lot like Yin from Ban? Now that you mention it, I think it's a bit similar. The boys and girls kept talking. Boom. The school bell rang, and Yin walked into the classroom just as the bell rang. In Zaiweixing, classes are assigned to each grade based on academic performance and family status. The first one is the children of high-ranking officials who have the best academic performance and the highest family status in Kyoto, followed by Ban, and then the others in order. The only difference is the class. This class is the most mixed class in Zaiweixing Academy, with people from all kinds of backgrounds. But the only thing they have in common is that the people in this class have the worst grades and are the most undisciplined, and some even have quirks. The school cannot afford to offend the students of this school, so they are all put into classes for unified management. But as long as he is in the class, he will undoubtedly become the object of everyone's ridicule and mockery. Yin is in the class. Yi Ning and Yi Fei are both in the Zaiweixing Academy class. As soon as Yin walked into the classroom, the students who were playing and joking suddenly stopped what they were doing. Who is this? A new student? Yin walked steadily to his seat as he remembered and sat down. In an instant, everyone in the class exploded. Is it Yin? That's her. Shit, I thought there was a new little brother here. One of the girls turned around, looked in Yi Yin's direction, and said to the people in the back seat, Hey, have you heard about that incident? I heard about it. TSK. I didn't expect she would have the nerve to come to school. The boy smacked his lips. Maybe I feel my face is as big as a basin. Look at her like that. She's really nice. The sound of their discussion was not at all reserved and reached Yi An's ears. Ye Anfronet. It was Yi Ning again. She could figure it out without thinking that Yi Ning must have spread some rumors about her after arriving at school. At this time, a female teacher in a professional suit walked in. Classmates. All the students in the class looked up at the teacher and then continued to do their own things as if she didn't exist. The female teacher walked up to the podium, counted the number of people, paused for a moment with Yin, wiped her glasses. Yi Weigua. As soon as these three words came out, everyone burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Even some of the quiet geeks in the class laughed. The only ones who remained calm were Yin herself and a handsome boy sitting next to her who was only focused on his laptop. Yin looked at the female teacher, sitting upright, with a sharp gaze and full of energy. What's the matter? It might be because of Yi An's expression that the students who originally wanted to laugh suddenly couldn't laugh anymore. The female teacher was a little embarrassed. Nothing. She thought to herself, what happened today? I always felt that Yin was weird. Usually when people called her by her full name, she would lower her head and not say anything, and everyone would just laugh it off. But today, when people called her by her full name, she was so confident. Why was that, fatty? And wasn't there a rumor today that, how could you still sit here and attend class? After a while, the female teacher started teaching on her own. The students in the class continued to do their own things, and the teachers and students did not disturb each other, as if it was a tacit understanding that had been formed for a long time. Yin took a quick look and assigned the students to their seats according to the information in his memory. In addition to a few pure second-generation rich kids, there are also a few notorious weirdos in the class. The boy sitting next to him, concentrating only on his laptop, was called Lin Luo. It was said that his parents were both members of the Imperial Hacker Alliance, and he himself was also a computer geek. Although he looked handsome, he was very sloppy and otaku. He basically spoke no more than 5 sentences a day. Don't stop this rhythm. It's playing in my head, and I can't stop shaking. Fuck. Can you please stop singing? Singing the same song every day is annoying. I'll die if I change it. The tall boy stood up, picked up a book, and threw it at the boy who was humming and swaying with headphones on. What's wrong with me, just liking to sing Shihuyo? The singing boy slapped the table and stood up. The two of them started fighting without saying anything, and the class quickly split into 2 groups, and a group fight broke out in the class. Most of the girls were rich girls, and they screamed in fear. The boy singing is called Su Yin. His mother is an imperial-level movie queen. He has a prominent family background and controls half of the current entertainment industry. The boy who started the fight was the son of a boxing champion, Wang Hao. He was tall and strong, and he advocated violence. He liked to fight whenever he disagreed with someone. Teacher, it's time to move on to the next page. Yin suddenly spoke, startling the female teacher Lin Jing, who was staring in amazement at the fight between her students. Lin Jing looked at Yin and almost burst into tears. In this class, there were actually students who were listening to her lecture seriously. Yi Yan's words instantly inspired Lin Jing's teacher spirit to light up himself and others. Although this student is a fighter among the poor students. Okay, teacher, please continue. Lin Jing began to continue the lecture with excitement. Lin Luo, who had just finished typing a line of code, suddenly turned his head and looked at Yi Yan, a hint of confusion appearing in his deep, dark eyes. Yi Yan tapped the table lightly with his fingers, looked at the book in front of him, and raised his lips slightly. Class? It seems not as boring as he imagined. And at this time, in the board of directors' office, Chairman Mr. Fu is here. The secretary came in and extended his hand to invite two people in. One of the men was tall and wore beige trousers, a white shirt, and a beige vest, which perfectly set off his body proportions. Two buttons of his collar were undone, revealing a little bit of his collarbone. He had a handsome appearance and exuded a natural dignity. The man following behind him was wearing a dark suit and looked equally handsome and gentlemanly. Master Fu. Chairman Xie immediately stood up and went forward to greet him very humbly. Fu Yunshin chuckled and snapped his fingers. Lu Qi nodded and went outside to wait. Chairman Xie smiled apologetically. Mr. Fu, please take a seat. Fu Yunshin sat down readily with a smile on his face. Before, Chairman Xie had talked to my father many times about Xiweixing College setting up an on-campus research institute. Yes, the funds required to set up an on-campus research institute are not a small amount. Although the school board can raise some funds, Mr. Fu should also understand that based on the scale of the project and the projects that need to be introduced, the amount required is a huge amount. Chairman Xie said earnestly. Fu Yunshin tapped the sofa impatiently with his slender fingers, a smile on his lips. As the bell rang for the end of get out of class, the fight in the class came to an end. Teacher Lin Jing left in a hurry, as if someone was chasing her. Su Yan was injured. As a nobleman, he was naturally no match for the son of a boxing champion. However, there are limits when fighting at school. Just vent your anger and forget about it. Besides, everyone's family background is not something that can be easily provoked. Lin Luo, who was sitting next to Yin, seemed to be stuck in a bottleneck at this time. He stared at the screen in front of him with a cold sweat and his fingers tapping nonstop. Yin accidentally glanced at his screen and said calmly, "The code on line 340 has a transmission error." Lin Luo looked at Yin in surprise, and the cursor immediately moved to line 340. After checking it once, he showed joy in his eyes. "Thank you," he said to Yin with great gratitude, and then continued typing on the keyboard. As soon as Lin Luo spoke, many people in the class looked over. Lin Luo was a well-known dullard in the class, and it was unprecedented for anyone to get him to say a word, let alone get him to thank him in person. Even though Yi Yin and Lin Luo had been sitting next to each other for such a long time, Lin Luo had not said a word to Yi Yin. "Did the sun rise from the west today?" Yi Yin grinned lightly. "You're welcome." Everyone in the class. Did Yi Yin change his character or not? "Hey, Yi Yin, can I ask you something?" A girl put her hands behind her back and looked down at Yi Yin with a hint of provocation. The girl is tall, and her hot body can be seen even in the college uniform. Yi Yin raised his eyes. "What's the matter?" Lu Shui smiled and exchanged a glance with the students around her. Everyone also looked teasing and looking forward to the show. "I heard that you were gang raped. Is this true or false? If it's true, how come you can still come to school today?" Lu Shui said with a smile, looking Yi Yin up and down meaningfully. Her meaning couldn't be more obvious. Some boys in the class also started discussing it in low voices. Yi Yin was as calm as he could be, but his gaze suddenly turned a little colder. It's better not to say anything without any evidence. There's a saying that goes, misfortune comes from the mouth. Lu Shui's expression suddenly changed. "What do you mean? Yi Yin, who do you think you are? Who gave you the courage to speak to me in this tone?" Before Lu Shui finished her words, Yi Yin's slender legs moved and quickly pressed Lu Shui's entire arm onto the table. The strong force caused her entire body to fall down. "No one taught you what politeness is, so I'll teach you," Yi Yin said in a cold tone. That's right, Yi Yin's upper body didn't move at all. It was just the strength of his legs. For a moment, Everyone in the class was shocked. Even Wang Hao felt frightened. He knew very well that to achieve this, he needed a very strong control to just control all the strength to his legs. Wang Hao suddenly had to open his eyes again and look at Yin, who had always been ignored by them and lived at the bottom of the class. Yin, let me go! Lu Shui shouted angrily, but no matter how she struggled, she couldn't move those thin and slender legs at all. A group of Lu Shui's good friends in the class wanted to take action, but they were too eager to try to move forward. One of the girls picked up a bench and threw it directly at Yin. Bitch! Before the stool fell on Yin, Yin moved his feet and kicked Lu Shui, who was pressed on the table by her legs, towards the girl. The bench was also smashed onto Lu Shui by this great force. Ah! Lu Shui suddenly cried out in pain. For a moment, no one dared to move. People looked at each other and stared at Yin with cold eyes, as if they were meeting this person for the first time. Lu Shui stared at her with eyes that seemed like she wanted to eat her. Yian's eyes swept over them one by one. Although her physical fitness was not strong now, after the repair of the supernatural power, her body had recovered almost completely. Moreover, there were 10 kilograms of sandbags tied to her legs. So every time she kicked out, it was much heavier than her own weight. She stood up slowly. She was much taller than the average girl and looked unusually tall at this moment. Since we are classmates, I don't want to do anything to my own people. But if there is a next time, she curved her lips, it won't be as simple as just moving your legs. She knew the rules of Zaiweixing Academy very well. Almost everyone here had a strong background. There was an implicit rule that the elders and their families would never interfere in the affairs of the school. Once someone at home is blamed for things that happen here, that person will be despised by everyone. Even if he or she holds a high position in the future, all his or her interpersonal relationships will be completely severed here, and he or she may even achieve nothing in the end. As for how far you can get here, it all depends on your ability. So Yin knew that even if she took action against Lu Shui, it would not have any impact on their family. Lu Shui glared at Yin hatefully and wanted to take action, but was stopped by a look from Wang Hao. Yin glanced at Wang Hao and had some ideas in mind. This young man was the core figure of the class. In his past memories, because Wang Hao's martial arts value was extremely high, he naturally became the class leader. It's just that this boss has a very special habit. He particularly hates people singing shihuyo in front of him. The reason why Wang Hao stopped Lu Shui from taking action was the 3 words, one of our own, in Yi An's words just now. The two men's eyes met. Yin gave Wang Hao a strange and polite smile, then walked out of the classroom. Wang Hao. Lu Shui was a little indignant. Why are you hitting people from your own class? Wang Hao said dissatisfiedly. Lu Shui retorted. Then why are you still fighting with Su Yin? Su Yin came over nonchalantly, put his arm around Wang Hao's shoulder, and smiled lewdly while flirting with others. We are not fighting, we are sparring with each other. Wang Hao pushed Su Yin away and said, Get lost, you faggot. Humph. Lu Shui gritted her teeth in dissatisfaction and looked at Yin, who had already walked out of the door. Wait, she will teach him a lesson sooner or later. Yin walked out. Although she was very familiar with Zaiweixing Academy in her memory, she had never visited it in person. She is quite interested in this time and space. What's more, this place might be where she will stay for a long time. Oh my God! When did a handsome young man come here? A woman nearby looked at Yi, and who was walking by, and whispered to the people around her. Look carefully, that's Yin. He's a notorious scumbag. He just cut his hair short and wore pants. The other girl looked disdainful. Besides, I heard. The girl continued to say something to the people around her. Then the way they looked at Yin was different, with a kind of contempt and pity. Likewise, the girls who passed by her looked at her in amazement at first, but when they recognized her, their expressions immediately changed. Even the boys looked at her with disdain. Yin glanced at them indifferently. She thought that maybe she should have a good chat with Yining some other day, but she had just taken 2 steps forward when her way was blocked by a wall of flesh. Yin raised her head and saw a tall and handsome young man in front of her. The bow tie of his college uniform was casually untied, and his hands were in his trouser pockets, giving him a casual and cynical vibe. Behind the young man, there were several boys who looked like followers. Yin? Lu Sheng was a little incredulous, and his tone was very strange. Is there anything wrong? Yin smiled slightly and spoke in a light tone. The information of the person in front of him quickly flashed through his mind. After reading this information, Yin was frightened. Lu Sheng, the son of the Xinglu Empire's military Lu family, is like Yin. His family has been in the military for generations. Even now, The Liu family is still a military family with great influence in Kyoto. Since General Liu is still in office and has great prestige in the army, the Liu family status is also at its peak. For a military family, the rank of the military personnel in the family determines the family status in the empire. Because Yi Yan's grandfather has been admitted to the hospital and Yi Jindong's military rank is only a colonel, the status of the Yi family is no longer as high as before. Of course, this is not the point. The point is that Lu Sheng's grandfather and Yi Yan's grandfather were comrades-in-arms who had been through life and death together. They were even betrothed to each other since childhood. In other words, the man in front of him was Lu Sheng, no, his fiancé. However, in his memory, this fiancé didn't care about Yin at all, but cared a lot about Yi Ning. Lu Sheng looked Yin up and down again, as if he didn't believe it. Are you really Yin? In the past, Yin always looked timid and infatuated when she saw him. Why did she change her personality now? Moreover, why did she cut her hair and wear a men's college uniform? Yin straightened his spine, looked directly at Lu Sheng, and suddenly curled his lips. If everything is fine, I'll leave first. She didn't want to waste time with this playboy. She would rather take a few more steps to exercise her leg muscles. Who allowed you to leave? Lu Sheng reached out and grabbed Yi Yan's arm. It was not soft as he thought, but a cold hardness with tense muscles. Yi Yan's eyes gradually turned cold. Let go. Lu Sheng subconsciously let go of his hand. The followers behind him started to make a noise. What's your attitude? You dare to speak to Master Lu in this tone. You don't want to live anymore, do you? Don't think that I won't hit you just because you're a woman. Lu Sheng suddenly felt that letting go was not a wise decision. He sneered, looking at Yin with some disgust in his eyes. I heard that Miss Yi was hanging out with someone outside for a few days. Is that right? He always hated Yin, this useless person who knows nothing. Why did she become his fiancée? They were both members of the Yi family, so why wasn't he engaged to Yi Ning? Lu Sheng's words attracted the surrounding students to gather around and watch the fun. Although he didn't say it out loud, everyone knew it. What Lu Sheng was talking about was the rumor that was spreading all over the school now, about Yin being raped outside because he was not chaste. Yin narrowed his eyes coldly and looked at Lu Sheng without saying anything. I'm telling you, I'm not interested in being a scapegoat, and I won't marry a dirty woman. Now, I'm officially informing you that a dirty woman like you is not even worthy of carrying my shoes. The engagement between us is now canceled. Lu Sheng announced loudly, his words full of contempt for Yin. He had wanted to break off the engagement with Yin for a long time, but he had been forced to do so by family pressure. But after Yin's loss of virginity was exposed, it was only natural for him to break off the engagement. Yin had a blank expression on his face, without any of the reactions that everyone would want to see, such as shame, anger, or crying. Some people were even prepared to record a video of Yi and crying violently. But what does Yi Yan's reaction mean? Why does her look like the reaction of a straight man watching a melodramatic romance drama? Yi suddenly smiled, showing an indescribable confidence and indifference. Do you want to break off the engagement? Lu Sheng sneered. So what? Yi said coldly. Did your mother agree? Lu Sheng. What? Does your father agree? Yi continued. Lu Sheng. The crowd around. Yi-An's mouth curled up, and his tone suddenly became heavier, and every word was sonorous. Did your grandfather agree? Lu Sheng. With these words, Yi-An's momentum suddenly became fierce, which suddenly scared Lu Sheng. The people around were also so frightened that their hearts skipped a beat. Lu Sheng inexplicably felt a little lacking in confidence, as he indeed had not yet obtained his family's consent for this matter. Since you haven't agreed, why are you regretting the marriage? Yin said coldly. Yin had always been a soldier, and her speech and behavior were all military habits, which she couldn't change even if she tried. That was something she had engraved into her conscious memory. What's more, she used to be a commander, and her words were habitually oppressive from top to bottom. Although Yin is not as tall as Lu Sheng, she now makes people feel that her figure is extremely tall. That cold and stern voice, coupled with her tone and momentum, was just like a big boss teaching a little brother a lesson. The students watching were so shocked that their mouths opened wide. Lu Sheng felt a burning pain on his face, as if he had been slapped. He was actually scolded by a loser who was at the bottom of the class. Moreover, this was the person he wanted to break off the engagement with. He glared fiercely at the people watching around him, and the students immediately walked away, and the voices of discussion became quieter. Even if she didn't agree, so what? Do you think my Lu family would marry a slut? Lu Sheng stared at Yin and sneered. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few days, this slut would actually bite me. Yin felt a little helpless. Was the original owner of this body so annoying? He had just dealt with one person, and here comes another one looking for trouble. If it wasn't for himself who was in the body now, Yin would have been bullied to death by these people even if he wasn't killed. At this time, Yi Fei happened to see this scene from a distance and was about to turn around and leave, but for some reason, he turned back and walked towards Yin. As soon as Yi Ning heard the news, she hurried over here. How could she miss such a good show? Just thinking about Yin being humiliated made her feel relieved. At this time, people from Ban also came over after hearing the noise. In a short period of time, the place was surrounded by countless students, and some teachers were so scared that they thought a school fight had occurred. Yin raised his eyes to look at Lu Sheng, his tone upright and helpless. Brother, the ones who bite people are not trash, but dogs. For example, people like you. In the past, as a military commander, Yin would not be happy if he did not scold the soldiers under him every day, and he would do so without hesitation. Not to mention, now she was the one being scolded. You! Lu Sheng's face turned red with anger. Yin, you are looking for death. Lu Sheng stepped forward, grabbed Yin's collar with one hand, and slapped him in the face. Yi Fei and the crowd's expression suddenly changed. He took 2 steps forward and then stopped. Just as Lu Sheng's hand was about to fall, his wrist was tightly grasped by a big hand. There was a sudden sharp pain, and then his entire arm fell numb. Lu Sheng looked up and saw that the person holding his wrist was a young man who was taller and more upright than him, with handsome features. He was not wearing a college uniform, but a casual outfit. He obviously had a different temperament from ordinary people. It was a kind of innate nobility. Behind the young man, there were 2 or 3 secretaries and bodyguards, all dressed in suits and looking very imposing. But Lu Sheng had no time to care about the man's identity at this time. He moved his arms, but couldn't free himself from the hand. Yin's gaze naturally fell on the man, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Why is it you? Fu Yunshen did not answer Yi An's words, but let go of Lu Sheng from his hand. Suddenly, Lu Sheng took several steps back. If it weren't for the support of several followers behind him, he would have fallen to the ground. He held his wrist, which had instantly become red and swollen, and cried out in pain. Who are you? Lu Sheng asked coldly. Although he had the temperament of a young master, he was not a fool. He could tell at a glance that the man in front of him was not an ordinary person. Moreover, the person who could appear in Zaiweixing Academy like this must not be a simple character. Mr. Lu, that's Mr. Fu. A sharp-eyed follower behind him said, in an almost trembling voice. Mr. Fu? Lu Sheng thought about it in his mind, and his expression changed immediately. There is only one person who can match the word Mr. Fu. Only that person, the president of Yunting Group, Fu Yunshen. He is the most powerful person in the Kyoto Circle. Even if he is the son of a military family, he can't afford to offend him. But this person, why would he help Yin? Mom, From the moment Fu Yunshen appeared, a burst of crazy voices could be heard. Wow, want to get married? That seems to be Mr. Fu. A voice spoke cautiously. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of everyone present who had a relatively high status in the circle of power and wealth changed instantly, and they looked at Fu Yunshen with more respect in their eyes. The voices of those crazy fans also became much quieter. Yi Ning in the crowd immediately fixed his eyes on Fu Yunshen's face, his eyes full of admiration. She didn't know who Mr. Fu was, but this man was so handsome, and he was so young, yet he had such a strong aura. Just by looking at the secretary and bodyguards following him, she knew that his status must be high. And judging from the expressions of those people, this Mr. Fu must be some important figure. Damn Yin, when did he hook up with this man? The thin lips slightly raised. Master Lu's predecessors are all soldiers. As the heir of a military family, Master Lu actually bullied a girl at school, and it was his fiancée. If this word gets out, it doesn't sound good, right? Lu Sheng stood firm and smiled. It turned out to be Mr. Fu. Then he glanced at Yin. This is my fiancée. She did something she shouldn't have done behind my back. That's why I was a little angry and couldn't help but hit her. Fiancé. Fu Yunshen's cold words revealed a sense of danger. These 3 ambiguous words made Lu Sheng suddenly unsure whether he should answer or not. Yin straightened his collar, which had been messed up by Lu Sheng just now. Didn't you just say you regretted the engagement? Yi An's words successfully angered Lu Sheng. Then why are you still talking about regretting your marriage? Yin was stunned for a moment, then asked, You don't regret it after being scolded? Why are you so unsteady in your stance? Lu Sheng. Seeing the two of them bickering as if no one was around, Fu Yunshin frowned slightly. Who said that I won't regret the engagement? Lu Sheng said angrily. Yin, wait for me. I will go home today to cancel our engagement. Yin curled his lips slightly and uttered a word lightly. Okay. Lu Sheng was so angry that he was about to die. From childhood to adulthood, he had never been treated like this before. Moreover, this person is a waste despised by the entire academy, which is really embarrassing. He snorted coldly, gave Yin a look, and left with his man. Yin put away the smile on his face, searched the memory database, and came up with two very appropriate words, Zha. After taking a few steps, Lu Sheng resisted the urge to look back, clenched his fists, and walked away quickly with his companions. The students watching suddenly became nervous. Is Ban Yin going to completely defeat young Master Ban Lushing? This routine is wrong. In the previous scripts, Yin was despised and scolded, and he hid away from people. Is this the opposite of the routine today? Fu Yunshin frowned, glanced at the people watching the excitement, and called out, Lu Qi. Understood. Lu Qi smiled and snapped his fingers. The bodyguards in black suits following behind him took a step forward and glanced around with cold eyes. The students in the academy are not ordinary people, and it is obvious that these two bodyguards are not ordinary people at all. This kind of physique, and the iron-blooded aura emanating from them, can only be possessed by people who have walked out of a hail of bullets. Although there are only two of them, they are comparable to the guards around the prime ministers of the empire. Immediately, the students who were watching went back where they came from. Coincidentally, the class bell rang at this time, and everyone dispersed, except for Yi Fei and Yi Ning, who were originally in the crowd. Yin raised his head and looked at Fu Yunshin. His gaze swept all the way to the people behind him and locked on the two bodyguards. His eyes flashed, and he was a little surprised that they were actually retired Special Forces soldiers. Why did you cut your hair? Fu Yunshin looked at Yi An's hair with a hint of displeasure in his eyes. It's okay, it looks good. As he spoke, Fu Yunshin reached out and rubbed Yi An's hair. Well, although it was a little shorter, it felt pretty good to the touch. Yi An turned his head away and frowned. Are we familiar with each other? She had only met this man once, and they didn't have much in common. Why did this man act like they knew each other so well? Sister, are you okay? I just heard that Lu Sheng was causing trouble for you. Did he bully you? Yi Ning trotted over, stood in front of Yi An, and asked worriedly. Yi An raised the corner of her lips slightly. Wasn't Yi Ning watching the show from the sidelines? Now she was pretending to be a sister with deep affection. If you cry a little more and shed a few tears, I might believe you. Yi An said coldly, without any mercy. Also, you were the one who spread the news that I lost my virginity, right? Yi Ning's face changed, and there was some grievance in her tone. Sister, do you doubt me? After saying that, she looked at Fu Yunshin with an angry look, and this look in her eyes when she was angry was surprisingly charming. Fu Yunshin's eyes were cold, but he didn't say anything. What do you think? Yin rarely smiled, but it was a cold smile that made people feel cold. A trace of hatred flashed quickly under Yi Ning's slightly lowered eyes, but his face looked hurt, and his aggrieved eyes glanced at Fu Yunshin from time to time. But neither Yi An nor Fu Yunshin showed any intention of speaking. Even Yi An's expression clearly stated, Please start your performance. Yi Ning bit her lower lip lightly, her expression almost stiff, but the person she was waiting for hadn't spoken yet. Damn Yi An, if she didn't want to get to know this Mr. Fu, she wouldn't have come up to talk to her. Finally, she couldn't help but speak, whispering, Sister, who is this? Yi An looked indifferent and replied with 4 words, None of your business. As for Yi Ning, who was so vicious at such a young age, liked to do tricks, and was very scheming, she naturally wouldn't be in a good mood. Not to mention, she was the murderer of this body. Yi Ning was speechless for a moment after being scolded by Yi An's 4 words. He didn't even know how to refute. What's more, he was scolded in front of this man. He felt extremely ashamed and angry. Her eyes were red as she looked at Fu Yunshin, and finally her gaze fell on Yi An. Yi An, I treated you as my sister, but you treated me like this. I will never care about you again. After saying that, she turned and ran away crying. Yi An just sneered silently. Yi Fei, who was far away, saw Yi Ning running away, then looked at Yi An and turned away. Who is she? Although Fu Yunshin had already guessed it, he still asked. Yin took his eyes away from Yi Fei, who was leaving, and replied nonchalantly, "She's such a drama queen. The world owes her an Oscar." Fu Yunshin raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Yin with a hint of interest in his eyes. "How did you get here?" Yin asked. Fu Yunshin smiled slightly. "What do you think?" Yin subconsciously became alert, his eyes became cold, and he glanced at Lu Qi and the two bodyguards behind him. "Who are you?" Yin only now felt that she was too unfamiliar with this time and space. Even though she had memories of her previous body, they were still too narrow. If she wants to survive here and become strong, she must understand everything. She needed intelligence. The reason why this person appeared in this place should be just a coincidence. However, she only met him once, so she didn't believe that this man would come to her specifically. Besides, there was nothing good about her. Fu Yunshin stared into Yi Yan's eyes and said word by word, "Remember, my name is Fu Yunshin." He said only his name, not his identity. Yi Yan knew that this person's identity was not simple, which could be seen from Lu Sheng and the other's attitude towards Fu Yunshin just now. But with her current identity, she doesn't want to have anything to do with such people. 2 words, trouble. "I have to go to class." "Does it matter whether you attend class or not?" Fu Yunshin asked in a teasing tone. Yin knew that Fu Yunshin was making fun of her. After all, everyone in the academy knew that Yin was the worst student in the class. Observing the group's rules and order is a necessary awareness for a member. It was Yi Yan's habit to abide by the group rules. As a soldier, he had to obey orders. Even though Yi Yan would often use some extraordinary means to achieve his goals, he would strictly abide by the discipline rules. "I'll pick you up after school." Fu Yunshin put one hand in his trouser pocket. His straight trousers made him look tall and had a golden ratio. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, with a hint of cynicism in his calmness. Yi Yan frowned, not understanding what Fu Yunshin was trying to do. He turned and walked towards the class. However, just as Yi Yan took a few steps, Fu Yunshin suddenly called her. "Yi Weigua." Fu Yunshin opened his mouth. The name, which was obviously very earthy and tacky, actually sounded unusually nice when it came out of his mouth. Lu Qi and the two bodyguards' faces looked a little unhappy. "Doesn't the girl have a nice name? Why does the young master call her that name?" Yi Yan stopped and asked, "What's the matter?" To be honest, Yi Yan didn't have any feelings about this name. It was just a code name, just like her code name and name were both Lin, so she didn't understand why those people laughed at this name. A mischievous smile appeared on Fu Yunshin's face. "Nothing, just calling you." Yi Yan's face darkened slightly, and his eyes clearly revealed 2 words, "sick." He glanced at Fu Yunshin coldly, then turned and walked towards the classroom. Fu Yunshin stretched out his hand and tugged at the tie around his neck, twisted his neck slightly, and smiled deeply. "Lu Qi, do you think she looks especially good when she's angry?" Lu Qi touched the bridge of his nose and said, "Master, this Miss Yi is actually quite pretty." Lu Qi seriously suspected that his young master was really sick, otherwise who would chase a girl and deliberately make her angry. "Really?" Fu Yunshin narrowed his eyes. Lu Qi immediately said, "Hey, master is right. Missy looks best when she's angry. She's so handsome." Lu Qi didn't think about it, because the impression Yi Yan left in his mind was that he was handsome, so he said it out loud as soon as he opened his mouth. Fu Yunshin curled his lips and said, "Let's go." After saying that, he spread his long legs and turned away. Lu Qi and the two bodyguards behind him followed closely. This class was a self-study class, so when Yi Yan returned to the classroom, there was no teacher. But this time, when she returned, she was met with all kinds of strange looks. However, what she could clearly feel was that there was an obvious increase in inquiry and curiosity in these gazes. In the past, Yi Yan always had the least sense of existence in the class, and he was always the one who dragged the class down. But the people in this class were the least educated, and no one was a good person, so no one could say anything bad about anyone else. So it was not like the people in other classes who obviously despised Yi Yan. They just knew that there was such a person, and the only sense of existence was that he always ranked last in the college and was laughed at by others. Oh, and also because she has a younger sister and brother in the class. In comparison, Yi Yan naturally became the object of everyone's trampling and despise. But Yi Yan has been different since he came back this time. Could it be that, like in those fantasy novels, a powerful soul had traveled into the body of the useless guy? So this person was no longer the same Yi Yan as before? It's just a fantasy, but no one would really think so. Maybe Yi Yan was just pretending before. Isn't it said that if you don't explode in silence, you will explode in silence? I guess Ian exploded this time. Ian certainly didn't know what everyone was thinking. If she knew, she would probably rush up and ask, "Brother, how did you figure that out?" "Brother, how? This Ian?" He stared at the figure sitting upright in front of the seat. Observed for a while longer. After Wang Hao finished speaking, he looked at Su Yin, who was lying on the chair on the other side in a carefree manner. There is no doubt that Yin successfully aroused their curiosity. A day's classes passed quickly. Various rumors about Yin began to spread throughout the entire Zaiweixing Academy. That one, Yin from the second grade class, one of the best in the school. I heard that he almost had a fight with Master Lu Sheng from the same class today. This is the collective name for the group of 4 people from Zaiweixing Academy. The so-called is the English abbreviation, which means waste and garbage. And Yin was very honored to become one of the best in the whole school. With her courage, shouldn't she just hide away and cry? Why did she still fight? Who knows? Hey, look, that's Yin. The girl patted her friend's shoulder and pointed at a handsome and bright-looking boy. But the young man looked a little cold and serious. She. Is it really Yin? The cute, round-faced girl was surprised. Yeah. Hey, what's wrong with you? It turns out that I have been a bohemian and face-obsessed person all my life. When Yin walked to the school gate, he saw a car that stood out among a row of luxury cars. Because she drove that car. What's more, what made that car different from the others was that its parking spot was specially set up by the college for visiting leaders and high-ranking figures. So when Yin walked out of the school gate, he saw many people watching from afar, discussing in low voices, not daring to speak loudly or step forward. After taking a few lingering glances, they slowly left. There is a type of person whom they cannot afford to offend, nor do they have the courage to offend. Having been born in a circle of celebrities and nobles, most people understand this truth. Yin chuckled. He thought that what caused the commotion among these students was probably not the luxury car, but the man. Fu Yunshun leaned casually against the car body, holding a cigarette between his fingers, puffing out smoke. His handsome face was silhouetted in the smoke, giving people an elusive sense of mystery and evil charm. In fact, he could have waited for her in the car, but he was worried that Yin wouldn't be able to find him, so he just stood outside and waited. After Lu Qi knew the reason, his face couldn't help but twitch. "Master, wherever you park your car is the focus, especially in such a conspicuous place." When he saw the slender figure walking out, Fu Yunshun raised the corner of his mouth, and the impatience between his brows disappeared. He pinched the cigarette, but with his fingertips, and crushed it on the ground. He took the handkerchief with a faint fragrance handed to him by Lu Qi, wiped his hands, threw it back to Lu Qi, and walked directly towards Yin. Yin looked around, wondering whether to ask Yi Fei for a ride home, or to run and exercise home. Although Fu Yunshun was waiting for her, she didn't agree. Besides, who knows what this man is up to? "Are you looking for me?" A tall figure suddenly appeared in front of Yin. Yin raised her head, and a faint smell of tobacco instantly lingered above her. This tobacco smell was very light, even with a fragrance, and was not offensive. "No." Yin looked around, tightened his backpack, and prepared to run home. His physical fitness was a little weak, so he just regarded it as training. Fu Yunshun's brows visibly frowned. "Then what are you doing?" "Get ready to go home." Fu Yunshun said domineeringly, "Get in the car." "What are you doing?" Yin looked up and asked him puzzledly. Although Yin's current physical fitness is a bit poor, her height is still relatively tall among girls. She is even taller than some underdeveloped boys. But when standing in front of Fu Yunshun, he still felt a strong sense of oppression. He had to hold his head up when talking, and this feeling made Yin quite uncomfortable. "I'll take you home." Fu Yunshun raised his eyebrows subtly, his tone sounding strangely familiar. Yin decisively refused. "No, I can go home by myself." After saying that, Yin took a step forward and prepared to start running. Fu Yunshun lowered his eyes to look at her eager legs and feet. As soon as Yin raised her feet, Fu Yunshun bent down, carried Yin on his shoulders, and walked towards his car door. The crowd watching from a distance exclaimed at the interaction between the two. Most of the boys were cheering, while the girls were envious and jealous. They wished they could get Yin down, and the woman that Fu Xiao was carrying was actually them. Yin didn't react at first. In fact, she didn't expect Fu Yunshun to do this. When her feet were off the ground, she found that he was being carried on his shoulders. "Fu Yunshun, what are you doing?" For the first time since his rebirth, Yin couldn't control his emotions. Fu Yunshun smiled brightly. "I'll take you home." He added, "If you don't want to go home, You can come back to my house. Yin couldn't move her body at all. Fu Yunshin was so strong that she was forced to carry him on his shoulders. In addition to being angry, Yin also felt ashamed. After all, she was once the world's #1 commander of the Eastern Military Region. When had she ever been treated like this? Fu Yunshin had long legs, and he carried Yi to the car door in just a few steps and stuffed him directly in. Lu Qi was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. He immediately closed the door, got in the car and drove away, fearing that his young master's daughter, Miss Yi, would run away. The car started immediately and left Zaiweixing Academy directly. Yi Fei, who was originally leaning against the car body waiting, looked at this scene with a flash of disappointment in his eyes. He opened the door, got in the car, and went home. Ms. Ningning, are we going directly home? Asked the driver. Yining looked at the car speeding away outside the window, gritted his teeth, his eyes full of jealousy and resentment. Follow that car. Yes, ma'am. Fu Yunshin. Yin spoke coldly, word by word. Fu Yunshin smiled, not realizing at all that he might be blacklisted. Look, you look much more lively when you're angry than when you were always lifeless and acting like someone owed you tens of millions. As he spoke, Fu Yunshin couldn't help but stretched out his claws towards Yin and pinch her face. The soft touch made Fu Yunshin's eyes light up, as if he had discovered a new world. He wanted to pinch it again, but before he could succeed, Yin slapped him away. If you touch me again, I will kill you, Yin threatened in a deep voice. At this moment, Yian's eyes were filled with undisguised coldness and murderous intent. Lu Qi, who was driving in front, immediately became alert and subconsciously glanced at a small drawer in the front of the car. Fu Yunshin's eyes changed, his mouth curled up, and he put his hands behind his head. Girls, don't talk about killing people all the time. It's not good. Yin glanced at him coldly. She did not notice the hostility of the man in front of her. But I don't understand. What exactly does he want to do? Where are you taking me? Yin asked calmly. Didn't I tell you? I'll take you home. Ye anfuronet. What exactly does this person want to do? Master, there is someone behind us, Lu Qi said in a low voice while looking at the car in the rearview mirror. Hearing this, Yin also looked at the rearview mirror, his face changed slightly. Is it her? Fu Yunshin glanced at Yin, then looked at the rearview mirror and said calmly, Get rid of it, don't worry about it. Lu Qi nodded. Yes, master. Immediately, the car accelerated suddenly. Due to inertia and the fact that Yin didn't wear a seatbelt when she got on, even though she had great self-control, her body was still slightly tilted. Fu Yunshin put the seat belt across Yin's body and tied it to one side. There was some slight contact between their bodies during the process, and this physical friction made Yin tighten his face in displeasure. No matter how good your driving skills are, you still have to obey traffic rules when you are in the car. There was no expression on Fu Yunshin's face. He was so serious that there was not a single flaw to be found. Yin didn't say anything. Miss, we lost you, said the driver. Yi Ning's face suddenly turned ugly. Lost? How can you be so useless? You can even lose a car? Miss, that car turned too fast. I couldn't catch up at all. Yi Ning snorted coldly and was about to curse again to vent his anger. But suddenly he thought of something, suppressed his anger, and stopped scolding the driver. Normally, Yi Ning didn't show her true emotions so easily, but since Yin came back this time, she has been humiliated time and time again. The emotions that she could disguise very well before. Now she can't help but want to vent them out. Just then, Yi Ning's cell phone rang. Ning Ning? It's me, Lu Sheng. Yi Ning forced a smile. What's the matter? I want to have dinner with you after school. Is that okay? Okay. Yi Ning grinned and replied with a smile. After hanging up the phone, Yi Ning looked at the endless stream of vehicles in front of him with a sneer on his face. Yin, I will definitely ruin your reputation. Yin looked ahead and realized that Fu Yunshin had not lied to her and was indeed sending her home. The security guard guarding the gate of Hanyuan Villa District saw a silver-white luxury car approaching, which was not a vehicle from the Villa District, and planned to stop it. The car drove directly to the gate of the villa area. The security guard knocked on the car window gently and said in a deep voice, Sir, I'm sorry. This is the Hanyuan Villa District, and vehicles outside this community are not allowed to enter. Lu Qi looked at the security guard and handed over a black card. The security guard took the card, took a look at it, and his expression immediately changed, his attitude becoming extremely humble. He handed the black card to Lu Qi with both hands, made way for him, and saluted respectfully. Excuse me, sir, please. Lu Qi curled his lips, put the card away, and the car drove and unimpeded. Looking at the car, the security guards were worried. Honyuan Villa District is not an ordinary place. All special villa districts in Kyoto are like this. The hired security guards will naturally be different. Their superiors have explained this to them during their on-the-job training. No matter which villa area or anywhere else, people holding 3 color cards cannot be stopped or offended. The 3 colors are red, silver, and black. Those who hold red cards are military personnel, while those who hold silver cards are high-ranking politicians. As for those who hold black cards, there is no special definition, but black cards are higher than the first 2. Who are you? This was the second time Yin asked Fu Yunshin this question today. She was very curious about the status of this man, who looked less than 20 years old. Didn't I tell you my name? Fu Yunshin looked at Yin. As long as you want to know, you will definitely find a way to know. She would know his identity sooner or later. But wouldn't it be more interesting to let her find out on her own? As long as she wanted to know, he believed that she would find out sooner or later. Yin didn't ask any more questions. After the car stopped, he said thank you, unbuckled his seatbelt, and got out. Fu Yunshin also got out of the car. When Yin walked forward without looking back, he suddenly called her. Yan. This time he called out these 2 words. She paused. Fu Yunshin smiled with his lips bent, his handsome face showing some warmth. I have something to inform you. What's the matter? She asked puzzledly. I agreed, and my mother agreed too. Fu Yunshin said without any context. Yin frowned, and then remembered that when Lu Sheng said he wanted to break off the engagement today, she asked these questions in a row. But is there any connection between them? Agree to what? She asked. Fu Yunshin smiled and said, I agree that you can break off the engagement with him, and my mother agrees that you can be her daughter-in-law. He looked Yin up and down, as if he was a little disgusted. Although he is a little small, it is still okay to raise him for another 2 years. Yeah. She was silent for a while, looking at Fu Yunshin, who made the unilateral announcement, and finally uttered 3 words lightly, psycho. After saying that, Yin walked towards the Yi family villa without looking back. And these 3 words successfully made Fu Yunshin's smiling face crack. This ungrateful little thing. Go back to the manor. After getting in the car, Fu Yunshin's face was obviously not very good. Yes, young master. Lu Qi looked at his young master's dark face and seemed to be hesitant to speak. Fu Yunshin frowned. Just say whatever you want to say. Lu Qi finally couldn't help it. Master. Actually, you can go ask Major General Qiao how they usually pick up girls. His young master finally showed interest in a girl for the first time, and Lu Qi couldn't bear to see the flower die before it even bloomed. Fu Yunshin narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Shut up. Lu Qi consciously shut up and drove without saying anything. After a long while, Fu Yunshin suddenly picked up his mobile phone and dialed a number. Tensu. Hey Yunshin, the sun has risen from the west? You actually took the initiative to call me? Come to my manor immediately tomorrow. What is it? It's urgent. Then I want to ask you tomorrow, or immediately, or right away. Hey. Don't hang up the phone. Lu Qi, who was driving seriously, pursed his lips and said, Don't smile. You must not smile. Remember this and tell your wife when you get back. After Yin returned home, he met Yang Zhidong, who was applying a facial mask and watching a soap opera on the sofa. Ignoring her, I went upstairs. What an uneducated thing. Yang Zhidong curset inwardly. After seeing Yin go upstairs, she quickly picked up the phone that was video chatting with her and immediately went back to the bedroom. As soon as I entered the bedroom, I heard the man's voice on the other end of the video. Baby, what's wrong? It's nothing, just a cheap thing. After Yang Zhidong said this, she returned to her previous appearance. She tore off the mask, began to take off her pajamas, and looked at the handsome face on the phone. Baby, let's continue. Okay, this time, you better be ready, you little slut. Then, bursts of sounds of flirting between a man and a woman began to be heard in the room, but the sound insulation of the entire villa was very good. If it weren't for the throat-breaking screams, no one would have been able to hear what was happening in the room. After Yin entered the room, he threw his school bag aside, turned on the computer, and began to enter the 3 words Fu Yunshin in the search box. Soon, all the news about Fu Yunshin popped up, but all the messages only contain one piece of information. Fu Yunshin, 20 years old, current president of Yunting Group. As for everything else about Fu Yunshin, there was no trace at all. Yin leaned back in his chair. It was impossible for a normal person's information to be like this, unless Fu Yunshin's background was not known to the public. Moreover, it was classified as a top-secret file. Fu Yunshin tapped the edge of the chair with his fingers in annoyance. Suddenly, she remembered that when she pointed out the mistakes to Lin Luo today, the programming language he used seemed to be the same as that in her previous time and space. She immediately sat up and looked up the programming language and electronic code of this world on the computer. It was indeed the same as the world she lived in before, but it was also different, because these were low-level programming languages in the end times and had long been eliminated. A smile appeared on Yi En's lips. He entered a string of codes on the computer. Immediately, a black interface popped up on the computer, and countless characters were jumping on the black interface. She pressed the enter key, and a password box popped up on the entire interface. This password box really stumped her, because if she entered the wrong number, the system would sound an alarm, and the administrators would quickly locate her. This password box gave her a headache for a moment. He gave up investigating Fu Yunshin's information and called Lin Luo. Lin Luo. Yeah. Lin Luo's voice sounded a little surprised, perhaps because this was the first time Yin called him. Help me hack into a system and look up a person's information. You name the price. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while. Then he said, Okay, what system do you want to hack into? Imperial Information Security Agency. The other side was silent for a long time. This is illegal. Yin smiled and habitually knocked his legs on the table and crossed them together, and said lazily, Compared to what classmate Lin has done, this one is not the worst. On the other end of the phone, Lin Luo's eyes suddenly became sharp under his frameless glasses. After a long while, he spoke, 100,000, no negotiation. Okay. Yin agreed readily. She had no shortage of money. Since she was a child, Yin's grandfather would deposit a fixed amount of money in her name every month. The Yi family didn't know about this. After hanging up the phone, Yin took the phone in his hand and played with it. Lin Luo was the desk made of the original body's owner, so everything about him could be found from his memory. In Yin's memory, Lin Luo had never attended classes, and the only thing he did every day was to fiddle with his computer. Not long ago, Yin had caught a glimpse of a screen showing funds being transferred into Lin Luo's computer. But the original owner didn't know what was going on, so he didn't care. But after her analysis, she could naturally conclude that Lin Luo must have been doing hacking business in secret. In fact, this is indeed the case. Lin Luo is a talented person. If he can be used for his own benefit, Yin started to make some calculations in his mind. Lu Sheng had been waiting in the restaurant for a long time, until he began to get impatient, and then the figure he had been anxiously waiting for walked in from outside. A Sheng. Yi Ning greeted with a smile. Lu Sheng smiled happily, stood up immediately, and pulled the chair out for Yi Ning like a gentleman. Ning, you are finally here. Yi Ning sat down, smiled sweetly, and supported her chin with one hand. Yes, of course I have to dress up a little more beautifully to meet Ah Sheng. Lu Sheng's heart and eyes were filled with happy smiles. This is a girl he likes, cute, innocent, and excellent. Why did he arrange marriage with another loser instead of her? Ah Sheng asked me out just for dinner? Of course not. Lu Sheng replied immediately, and then said, Ning, I asked you out this time because I have already decided on something. What's the matter? Yi Ning asked, although she already knew it vaguely in her heart. I plan to go home and tell my family that I want to cancel my engagement with Yin. Lu Sheng said seriously. A smile appeared in Yi Ning's eyes. Okay, since you don't like my sister, it would be best to cancel the engagement. This way, she can also laugh at her own joke. Yi Ning suddenly thought of something and reminded seriously. However, even if your family agrees, Yin may not agree. What's more, my grandfather likes her the most and gave her the inheritance rights of the Yi family. Therefore, you must make Yin agree. Lu Sheng nodded. What do you think I should do? Yi Ning's eyes secretly showed contempt for Lu Sheng, but he pretended to be thinking seriously on his face. Well, I heard from my mother a few days ago that next weekend, all the wealthy and high-ranking officials in Kyoto's aristocratic circles will attend a dinner party. At that time, our family and your family will definitely attend. And you will announce this at the banquet, in front of so many people. Yin will not be able to refuse even if he wants to. What do you think, Sheng? Yi Ning looked at Lu Sheng expectantly. Lu Sheng agreed and nodded. Okay, then I will announce that the person I like is you. This way, we can be together legitimately. Yi Ning's expression suddenly changed, and the smugness on his face suddenly disappeared. Ning, what's wrong with you? Are you unhappy? Or do you not want to make our relationship public? Lu Sheng asked cautiously. Yi Ning looked embarrassed. She was still young. Although Lu Sheng's family was considered to be a second-tier upper-class family in Kyoto, she didn't want to hang herself on this tree. The reason she seduced Lu Sheng was not only because of his family power, but also because he and Yi had arranged a marriage. The old man was so partial that he not only gave Yi and the inheritance of the Yi family, but also found a fiancé for her. She just couldn't accept it. Why should that woman who could do nothing right deserve all this? Sheng, let's not announce it in advance. Otherwise, everyone will know and will definitely think that you have changed your mind and that you are wrong. So when the time comes, you just need to cancel the engagement with her, okay? Yi Ning said in a gentle voice. Lu Sheng was immediately deeply moved. His Ning was always thinking about him. She was worthy of his liking and love. Okay, I understand. Lu Sheng held Yi Ning's hand. Ning, don't worry. I will give you a legitimate status one day, and I will never let you down. Yi Ning smiled. But in her heart, she thought of the man she met today through Lu Sheng's face. She put down her hand and asked with pretended curiosity, Sheng, who is the man who showed up at school today? I heard some people call him Master Fu. Is he someone important? Lu Sheng was a little unhappy that Yi Ning suddenly asked about other men, but he still answered. But his voice was relatively low, as if he was afraid of being heard by others. Do you know Yunting Group? Yi Ning was surprised for a moment. I know. More than just knowing, he was very familiar with it. The Yunting Group could be said to be the largest consortium in the empire. Many things in life come from the industries under the Yunting Group. It is no exaggeration to say that it is rich enough to rival a country. Mr. Fu is the current president of Yunting Group, Fu Yunshin. Lu Sheng whispered. He is less than 20 years old and has already taken charge of the entire industry. Anyone who is in the upper class of Kyoto knows that Mr. Fu is someone who cannot be provoked or touched. His status is not just as simple as the heir of Yunting Group. What do you mean? The more Yi Ning listened, the more interested he became in this man. Lu Sheng frowned. He is the one at the top, and only those at the top of the pyramid can be on equal footing with him. And those people call him the prince. A long time ago, when I knew the name Fu Yunshin, my grandfather told me that this person is not only the prince of Kyoto, but also the prince of the entire empire. He is a person who you absolutely cannot afford to offend. The aristocratic circle in Kyoto is like a pyramid. Most of the old-school families are in the second and third tiers, and the first tier is the group of people headed by Fu Yunshin in the past. Each of those people has a terrifyingly powerful background, such as Qiao Yang and Chen Su. Therefore, anyone who is in the upper-class circle in Kyoto will know the existence of Mr. Fu. Seeing Yi Ning still pondering, Lu Sheng comforted her. You are a girl, and you don't pay much attention to these things. It's normal for you not to know. Yi Ning smiled shyly in agreement, but secretly thought in his heart, Crown Prince? Doesn't that mean that Master Fu's status and position are much higher than Lu Sheng's? When did Yin hook up with a man like this? Damn Yin, it's true that she always gets all the good things. Young Master, the two thugs have been found. Lu Qi walked over respectfully and reported. Fu Yunshin turned around slowly while sitting on the chair, crossing his legs, which made his long legs look as if they had nowhere to go. He raised his eyelids slightly, his tone cold as ice. Where are the people? Lu Qi tapped the watch on his wrist, and instantly, a 3D projection was projected out from the watch. In the picture, the two thugs were banging on the room where they were imprisoned like crazy. Who are you? Why are you arresting us? Be careful, or I'll sue you. Let us out quickly if you know what's good for you. These two thugs were the ones who attempted to rape Yin and eventually dumped her body in the wilderness. Noisy. Fu Yunshin frowned. Lu Qi immediately gave some instructions over there. Immediately, a burly man walked into the room. When he came out, the two thugs were lying on the ground, covered in blood. Have you found out? Fu Yunshin asked. Master, I found out after asking them. They said they were instructed by someone to ruin her reputation. But Missy accidentally fell from the building and died. That's why they dumped her body on the mountain. Fu Yunshin's eyes turned slightly cold. Well, I understand. Lu Qi was puzzled. Master, don't you want to know who ordered this? He was ready to tell you. So why didn't the master ask? No, it's enough for her to know. Fu Yunshin smiled. It's better to let her do this kind of thing herself. Maybe it will be more interesting. What about these two people? Lu Qi asked. Spare her life. Fu Yunshin looked at the two thugs hiding in the corner with their heads in their hands and remembered the video he saw that day. It was these two hands that lifted her up and threw her away. Chop off their fingers and lower body. Fu Yunshin added calmly. Remember, chop them off section by section. Lu Qi felt a chill down his spine. Yes, master. Yin developed a physical fitness plan for himself, which also included a diet plan for meals. Now she doesn't even dare to use her supernatural powers easily, because due to her weak physical strength, once she uses her supernatural powers, her mental power will be greatly depleted. In particular, she has dual supernatural powers, which consumes more energy and spirit of the human body.